Now, most of us at some point probably have it in our minds that it would be nice to be able to anchor, but many people have, frankly, the fear of anchoring. You can hear all kinds of stories and you're saying, am I doing it right? And dare I leave the boat, or do I want to sleep overnight on this boat? And what happens if it blows and so forth? That's a pretty good fear to have. If you don't know how to do it, then probably don't. And we're going to cover at best sort of a hop, skip, and a jump across the surface of it. I could spend hours on the topic with you folks. I subscribe to sort of the consumer reports of boating magazines called Practical Sailor. At least half of their issues have things that are good for power boaters and good for sailors, but an excellent thing. And excellent magazine, they always seem to have at least 3 or 4 articles per year on anchoring, whether it's the chains or the different kinds of anchors or different kinds of bottoms, or test this, test that. There's a million opinions on this stuff. So what I'm not going to try to do is to go into all the details about all the different anchors. If you want a detailed explanation of a lot of what you'll see out there if you need to buy a new anchor, is go online. And I would start with the West Marine website, go in on their anchors, and they have all kinds of information about all the different anchors and what they're supposed to do and so forth. So we won't try to get into those details here. I do know that if there's enough interest in this class and the next one that I'm teaching, that I may try to run an anchoring seminar late this spring. And I'll let you folks know if I do that if you want to join. Okay, so the anchoring equipment, what you buy is going to depend upon all those things: the size of the boat, type of the boat, where you're likely to anchor. For those of us on the South Shore, we're in sand and mud. Go up to Maine, the mud can be pretty thin, and but there can be a lot of rocks, and if you're in a river, it can be a lot of deadheads, logs, and so forth. So you have to know where you're anchoring. And if you're in a river where there's a lot of current, that will change what you use. And if you're in an area that has a lot of wind. Parts of the anchor that you need to know about is the shank. Every anchor has some kind of flukes on it. These are flat ones. Here we have something that looks more like a plow, and that's what they call it, is a plow anchor, but those are still the flukes. And then you have what we call the rope. Everything that connects your boat to the anchor is called the rope. And it will consist of, for most of us, a length of line, nylon, as we're going to talk about, some chain, and some shackles here, and a shackle here where these two connect, plus a thimble in the end of it, and so forth. So those are the general things that go into anything, any anchor system. A Danforth type anchor. Danforth is a brand name and are very popular. If you have held a gun to my head and said, okay, I got to pick one anchor that's going to be easy to handle, hold my boat, stow away easily, do pretty well in most types of bottoms, what would you recommend? Okay, I guess I'd say this. Now, I own one of those plow anchors, but as a general, for different reasons, but as a general rule, if you don't know what else to buy a Danforth style anchor for the reasons that they show here. If you're in a rocky area, no, it's not so good. Plow types, again, what I use, once you get a plow, you need to have a roller on the front of your boat. I have a roller, but I don't like leaving it there on the front of the boat. I'm lucky I have an anchor locker right on the back. I move the cover and everything goes in. So it's not as easy for me to use and deploy as having it permanently on the bow. For personal reasons, I put it in a locker. Holds on different kinds of bottoms better than the Danforth type does. We'll talk about trip lines here in a minute. The anchor rope connects your boat to the anchor. It includes the chain. Now the chain is there for weight, for a horizontal pull. First rule is that plow type anchor that I have, I wouldn't even use it right now. That plow type anchor I have is 35 pounds. It's pretty heavy, but it's holding a 12,000-pound boat. Clearly, the anchor that I have isn't holding because I dropped 35 pounds in the water and now the boat stays put. It holds because of the flukes that once it digs in, it will hold against any a good strong pull from a wind. But in order to get it to dig in, what we're going to demonstrate here in a little bit is it has to have a flat horizontal pull across the bottom, or as horizontal as you can get it. Pull it across the bottom flat, and it will dig in. As we're going to see, if the angle is too high, is too straight, well, then the anchor is going to pull out. Because let's face it, that's how you're going to take an anchor out. Is you're going to go right over it, get that line straight up and down, and it will pop right out of the bottom in most cases. So you want the weight of the chain on the bottom to help keep the rode flat on the bottom as you're trying to set the anchor. How much chain? You have to size it for the boat and the conditions that you typically anchor in. The length of it for the total rode, again, is the depths and the conditions. And good idea to use depth markers when you're putting out your rode. Many people don't have these. They're cheap. They work very well. And you see them here. I bought a set of them, and the leftovers I put on this strip. They're just plastic that slide right into the anchor rode. And you lay your anchor and rode out in your driveway, get out your big tape measure, start measuring, and insert them into the anchor rode through the line at the correct distances, so that when you go to put, as we're going to see in a few minutes, when you go to put your anchor in the water, you know how much line you've gone out there. That's going to be very important for setting your anchor properly. We'll do all the math on that. So, how much anchor rode do you put out? So this term scope actually has two meanings. Scope can be just the length of how much anchor line you put out. If you put out 240 feet or 90 feet or what have you, it's just the length of the line. It can also refer to the ratio of the depth of the water to how much line you're putting out. And we'll see that here in a moment. So what you do to make this determination, you've gone into some harbor, you'd like to put the anchor down, and what you need to know is, let's do the easy part first. You're just going in somewhere, maybe you're going to anchor off a beach, and you got the kids, you got the grandchildren, what have you, and okay, we're going to be here for about 4 or 5 hours and have lunch and swim into the beach and spend the day here, and 4 or 5 hours we're going to go. And if you're down the Cape, the tide doesn't change that much. The tide is at best about 4 feet from low to high. Up here in Boston area, it could be 8 or 9 feet, but generally you're not going to be there all that long. So you check your depth meter, first of all, for how much water is under you, and you can start with that number. And let's suppose, for example, that it's where you come in near the beach, you're in 7 feet of water. But then you also have to add the distance from the water up to your anchor roller, or wherever the line goes over the edge of the boat. And that may be another 3 feet. So the actual depth from where the anchor line, the rode goes over the bow of the boat to the bottom of the water, is now at 10 feet. And typically we're going to tell you that you want the amount of line that you put out to be that ratio I just talked about of scope. You're going to want, even if you're just sitting there for lunchtime for a few hours and you're going to be on the boat sitting right on it, you want 5 to 1, which means you're going to want at least 50 feet of rode out. If you said, I'm going to stay overnight, or gee, it's windy, and I want to be really sure I stay put, then you'd want 7 to 1. So you'd want 70 feet out. And if you were going to anchor overnight and they were predicting thunderstorms with high winds and gusts from a front coming through, you might want to put 100 to 1 out. 10 to 1 out, and now you're up to 100 feet of scope out in front of you. And for every foot of water depth that you anchor in that gets deeper, well, now you're multiplying that 1 foot by 5, 7, or 10. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, you might need quite a bit of anchor line on the boat. It might be wise that even if it's only occasionally, you have at least 150 feet, and you won't regret having as much as 200 feet. There are exceptions to that. We'll cover a little bit of it here. So 7 to 1 is normal. 5 to 1 in light conditions, what I call a lunch hook. You just stay in for a few hours. You're nearby. You can keep an eye on things. and under heavy conditions, 10 to 1. Rope and chain. We put the chain on the bottom for a couple of reasons. One, for the weight, because it helps to keep the line down. Plus, that part of the anchor rod tends to be scraping across the bottom all the time. It's attached to the anchor. And as the boat swings a little bit and that anchor rod moves across the bottom, it's going to get a lot of chafe from all the crap that might be down on the bottom. So it's a lot stronger for that reason. And there are many larger boats where they have an anchor windlass, electric windlass on the front that will be all chain. You don't want to be pulling up all chain if you're doing it hand over hand. And so most of us do a combination of rope and chain. And this rope would be, as we're going to find out here in a minute, we're going to be talking about it a bit on the knots and lines and so forth. Nylon. Nylon has give. Nylon has stretch. So in your anchor lines, and yes, when you buy dock lines, you want nylon. You guys on our sailboats, we pull in a sail and pull it tight. We want something that doesn't stretch. We use polyester. We'll cover all of that here. So most of us use a combination because the rope is a shock absorber. Okay? And it's much easier on the boat, it's much easier on you, it's much easier on the anchor rope if you have a combination. This is where we could really spend, just on this one slide, we could spend an hour in determining, okay, now you're coming into some place you want to stay overnight, there's other boats anchored. How the heck do you pick the place and how do you set the anchor and so forth? Not for tonight, it takes too long. Good evening. You just curious and observing? That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue your presentation. I was trying to do anything.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You can say, that's all right.
Thank you so much for your time.
You can say. Okay. So maybe you have a question. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. There aren't particularly questions that get into this because there's 100 different issues dealing with that. And so we're not going to try to cover those here tonight. Anchoring seminar is where we get into. Now, setting the anchor. Let me just see if, in your book, by the way, some things I just covered, page 109, under scope, they give you, I put a star on the copy above that illustration at the bottom. All that copy under scope, I'd be very familiar with that. One thing that many people do forget to do on page 110, top of the columns and italics, don't forget to secure the other end of the line before you start putting the anchor over the side. Believe me, you will be part of a very large club if everything goes right over on you. And the other thing that they talk about on page 112, and they put it in red. Never, ever, ever, ever be so stupid as to anchor by the stern under any conditions. Just use that as a rule. Now, you get somebody else who can say, well, under this condition or that condition, it's okay to anchor up the stern. Really bad idea. So, wind picks up, the back of your boat is flat, it's going to take a pounding, it's not going to ride up and over the waves, literally, if it pulls hard enough and the wind gets up high enough, you can have waves coming up over the back of your boat where your outboard is and so forth, and right into the cockpit. So always anchor off the mark. Okay, so setting the anchor. What they recommend is this, that if you go into a harbor and or you're just off the beach, is figure out where the wind's coming from. And let's suppose it's running parallel to the beach here, that the beach is over here and the wind is coming in that direction. So you stay off the beach far enough that you know that you won't drown on it and you'll have enough water depth under you. And make sure if you're going to be there for a long time, you know whether the water is coming in with the tide or what's going out with the tide and how much of a tide you have, so that you don't find yourself suddenly sitting on a sandbar in Chatham or in Eastham or something like that when the tide goes up. Use, just as if you were coming into a dock, you're gonna, if you have a choice, you're gonna motor up into the wind when you anchor, just as that would be your preference when you come into a dock. Let the wind slow you down, act as a natural brake, and then you can use a little bit of forward motion if you have to. Figure out, first of all, where do I want my boat to end up? When I get all anchored, where do you want the boat to be? Okay, I want to be on this location off the beach. That's where I'd like to be. So now where am I going to drop my anchor? Well, I'm not going to drop my anchor there. My anchor has to be up here somewhere. So this is where the calculations come in. If you first motor over that spot, check your depth sounder. Yep, there's 7 feet of water here. Up to my roller is that 10-foot mark. I'm just here for lunch, so I'm going to put out 50. Maybe I'll do a little extra. I'll put out 60 feet of anchor. We're going to just stay for a few hours. Well, now you got the problem is, well, how far is 60 feet? So, Mahmood, how long do you have a boat, Mahmood? I forgot.
Yes,
How long is your boat?
21 footer.
21 foot. So if you have to go 60 feet, you say, I want the boat to be here. I got to put the anchor up there 60 feet. Well, you can't follow up the tape measure. But what you can do is figure out 3 lengths of my own boat. 21 feet times 3. Okay, so if I can say, okay, 1 boat length, 2 boat lengths, 3 boat lengths. Okay, my anchor's going up there. Use your own boat as a judge to figure out where you're going to drop that anchor. Now you motor up very slowly. Let's presume you have some crew on the bow of the boat. And you're going to motor up very slowly to that spot where you say, okay, this is the spot where I'm going to drop the anchor. Now, by the way, it would have been good to survey and do a swing around and figure out, I want my boat there. What's the depth there? And then go up here and figure out what the depth is up here. Now, you might be stopping in 7 feet of water, but you might find out when you get up here where you think you're going to drop the anchor. And do this before you drop the anchor and before you ever decide to make all your final decisions. You might find out, well, now all of a sudden it's 7 feet here, but it's 10 feet here. So now I've got a 13-foot bottom to roller times 5 or 6, and your amount of road you have to put out is going to be more. Okay. And therefore, you're going to come back further when you do that. So maybe you have to go up further to drop the anchor up there and deep water. So you have to keep doing these calculations to be sure that when you're all done, where you dropped your anchor, where you end up, the water depth, the anchor road, and it all falls into place. So you have to do a little bit of maybe pencil and paper math to figure out just how much road and where you're going to put that anchor. Motor slowly, slowly, slowly. You want to bring your boat, if possible, to an absolute stop over the spot where you'd like to drop it. And I don't mean slow it down or almost stopped. I mean, make sure your boat is absolutely stopped. And then lower the anchor. Do not toss it over. Lower it. Tell the person up front the water depth here is 10 feet. So therefore, it's going to be, or 13 feet. You're going to put out 13 feet and the anchor should hit bottom, because the person up front is putting it out. And when the anchor hits bottom, may or may not know that it hit bottom. It may not be able to tell, but we'll see why when we do a little demo here, why you want that. Then you let so the anchor touches bottom, and tell them to the person up front to put out 13 feet, put out 20 feet. That's all, 20 feet. You know, 13 feet from your roller down, put out 20 feet and hold it in your hand. Let the wind take over. The wind's going to blow your boat, let it drift backwards in a straight line. And you watching as the boat drifts back. What I have told my crew up front is that I'm going to keep telling you 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet. And every time that the boat moves, when I think the boat has moved back 6 feet, I want my person up front to have the line in their hand stretched out. And okay, another 6 feet goes out and they're ready to do it again. And another 6 feet. I'm not trying to anchor the boat yet. I'm just getting the anchor set and laid out on the bottom of the ocean. And I'm letting the boat drift back. When I get it back about halfway, 2/3 of the way, I'll tell him to put a turn around the cleat and just hold it. And by that I mean, let's suppose that goes to the anchor. This is the end of my crew's hand. This is my bow cleat up on the boat. When he gets it out about 2/3, I'll say, okay, take a turn around the cleat and hang on to it. And now the anchor line's not going to go out anymore, but the boat's going to drift back and it's going to start dragging the anchor across the bottom. And what I want to see happen is that the anchor starts to dig in, and I'll know that because the anchor line will go from being droopy, all of a sudden it's going to start to straighten out. And it's going to, the boat's going to, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a minute, is going to now turn and face into the wind. And I know the anchor is starting to grab. I then put the anchor into the motor into a very soft reverse and give it a little tug, and I just want to see if the anchor is going to set. Now, I don't have all the scope out all the way I want, but at least I'm finding out about halfway through this process that it looks as though my anchor is going to set. When I get to that point that I think, okay, I'm in a good location, it's setting well, things are looking good, I'll then say, okay, undo and let out 6 feet, let out 6 feet, let out 6 feet. And I tell the person up front, when we get to the point where a certain marker, and I'll have that marker figured out, I'll have done the math and how deep, and let's suppose I decide that I want 65, 70 feet of line in the water. One of the marks that I've got that come on these things is 60 feet, and I'll perhaps say to the person, okay, let me know when you find the 60-foot mark in your hand. Okay, I got the 60-foot mark, and I say, okay, get it wet. In other words, put it over the side and get it in the water. About another 10 feet, come back to the cleat, and I'll tell them to cleat it. And now I've got about 70 feet of anchor line up. Now I put the engine in, for me, with my big boat but a real little engine, I put it in a real hard reverse. And what I'm trying to do is really set the anchor and give it a good strong pull, especially if I'm staying overnight, which in most cases is the reason I put up the anchor, because I'm staying overnight. And frankly, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to get the anchor to pull out. I want the anchor to fail. I want the anchor to yank right out of the bottom. Because I'd rather have that anchor fail and find out that it's not holding for some reason at 4:30 in the afternoon when the sun's up and the seas are calm and I'm awake and the engine's running, than at 2 o'clock in the morning when the thunderstorm's coming through and the lightning's flashing and it's raining like hell and it's blowing 40 knots. That's not when I want to find out the anchor is going and it's dragging across the bottom. So I pull it really, really hard for an overnight stay to be sure that under almost any circumstance I can think of, that anchor is really well sunk in. Let's demo that right now. Now, you folks, if any of you folks up front can stay seated, if you get a good view of this, you can stay seated. You folks down the back may want to come up on each side. And Jim and I will do a little run through. And what I want you to see is, okay, what I want you to imagine as I do this is that right now, Jim and I are standing on the floor of this harbor, on the ocean bottom. We're standing in the mud, the sand. And that ceiling up there is where our high water is, okay? So we're underwater. And I want you to get a visual image of what we want the anchor to do when it's on the bottom, what we're hoping to have at here. All right, so Jim, you're going to be up the bow of the boat, and you're going to have this line. And we are in, let's do the simple one, which is, we're in 7 feet of water, 10 feet up to the bow. And so we're going to put out supposedly 50 feet of line. Now we don't have 50 feet of line. So I go into the wind, I figure out where the anchor is going to go, which is right there. And I want him to put it on the bottom with a little bit of the chain on it, but not all of it. And I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to say to Jim, we're going to come to a stop. I'm going to say, put the anchor down. And I'm going to tell him, put out about 15 feet and hold it. And so some of the chain is going to, now the boat isn't moving, we're at a complete stop. So some of the chain is going to go down and land right there. What I don't want to happen is for him to put all the line out and have it end up doing something like that. Because if you let it all out and pile it all on top, something bad is going to happen. So that when we try to set it, we got that going on the bottom. You don't want that happening. That's why you don't put it all up the minute it hits the bottom. So now there's a little bit on the bottom, and with luck, we just have the anchors just sitting in some manner on the bottom and some chain near it. Now, in my case, on my boat, I have 30 feet of chain. We'll go into why I do in a minute. So I definitely don't want him dropping 30 feet on top of it. So he's still got chain in his hand. And we come to a stop and put as much out as I want, so there's a little bit of chain on the bottom. And now the wind takes over and the boat starts to drift. Now, what happens to your boat, my boat, any boat when you start to drift? Does it stay pointed into the wind? No, it turns sideways. You drift sideways. So the boat turns sideways and we start to drift. So you're going to come back with me as we drift back. I'm in the cockpit, you're up in the bow. And we're going to drift a little bit. I'm going to say, okay, put out another 6 feet. He's going to let a little more out. We're going to drift some more. And then, okay, another 6 feet, Jim. We're going to drift some more. And finally, we're going to get back to where, and I'm going to tell him, okay, we're going to put out 7 feet. When you get the 30-foot mark, get it in the water, get it wet, take a turn on the cleat. So we'll have about 40 feet of my 70 feet out. And he does that. He takes a turn on it, and the boat continues to drift. So now you've got your hand on it. It's around a cleat, an imaginary cleat, but you and I in the boat are still drifting. And keep coming with me, Jim. And eventually that line is going to do this. Keep coming back with me. And this is what we want to have happen on the bottom, is this. Keep coming, keep coming. And now we look at the angle of the line. If we've got 40 feet out and 10 feet of water, that line is at a very good horizontal angle. I've got a lot of chain on the bottom, and this is going to drag across the bottom. And as it does, those flukes are going to dig in, which is what I want to have happen. But I don't try to make that happen until I've got that much out. I've tried very hard not to tangle on the bottom. And when it starts to dig in, it'll do this. And at that point, you go over there when you're done, snapping a picture. And at this point, the boat is coming around to the front a little bit. Go up to the anchor and just put your foot on it, put some weight on it for him. And it starts to dig in. And he's going to notice that the boat really swings completely up front and the line is going to stiffen. And depending upon how much wind we've got, the wind is going to make the line go like that. That's a sign that it's started to dig in. Certainly not safely, but it started to. Good sign. Now I'll put it into what I call a soft reverse. And I want to make it dig in a little, and I want the line to go straight. Now I can tell whether or not it's skipping across the bottom or if it's pulled out, because I will be looking at things off to one side or another. I'll have another sailboat beside me, and I'll look at the mast, and I'll look at the beach behind him or the houses behind him, and what I want to see is if anything's moving or if my boat is staying absolutely stuck still. And if it looks as though it's digging in, then I'll put the boat into neutral, and then I'll say, okay, Jim, we're going to let it drift back until let's get 70 feet out altogether, or 80 feet or whatever my number is, and I'll tell them, cleat it down and do a full honest to God cleats job on it. And then I will put it into the hard reverse, and I will sit there on a long, slow, for you guys, it would be modest reverse. For me, it's a hard reverse for about 45 seconds, not 10, no, 45 seconds. Turns out with research that a long, slow, hard pull sets the anchors much deeper than simply trying to gun it like heck for 10 seconds.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
You said you'd be drifting sideways?
Any boat drifting in the wind drifts sideways.
Right. Once the anchor starts to dig in, would your stern come around so you're pointing into the wind?
Yes.
So then when you reverse, you're reversing in line?
Right.
Okay.
And that's how I know immediately. When I tell them to cleat it, almost immediately I'll realize that the boat goes from doing this, and I say, take a turn, hang on to it, and almost immediately, if it's digging in, the boat will start. And within a boat length,
Okay.
it's now spun around front.
And then in terms of dropping it down, you said at first you just wanted to hit bottom.
At the
With
bottom,
little
yes, a
bit.
little bit of chain goes down.
Yeah.
I don't want to pile it all up on the
Yeah.
bottom because it's a
How-
recipe for disaster.
How would you do that on a bigger boat if you have a windlass And so you're not doing it by hand, and you can't feel it go
Correct,
flat.
but that's where you need to know how deep the water is where you're about to drop it.
Yeah,
And even on chain, you can paint the links. Red is at 30 feet, green is at 60 feet, blue is at 90 feet, and so forth. And who's ever up there can know which one is which and so forth. Paint is good as opposed to wire ties, because wire ties can get caught in the gypsy on the windlass. So painting the links at the lengths you need and so forth. So you and your crew both know what's out there in the water. And you just have to say, okay, water depth, how much chain. First mark is red, either the minute the red comes out of the locker or the red goes over the roller or the red goes in the water. At some point, your head is doing the math for how much you want out before you put a little stop on. Now, those are my techniques. They've been foolproof for me. For me to come into a harbor on my boat and to anchor, from the time I pull in the harbor and I go, I think there's a spot over there. Let's say where that building is. That looks like it might be a good spot to anchor. And I've checked off in my head about 10 different things for why I think that's a good spot. So from the time I say, I think right there, and I go up and I survey the area with my depth sounder, and I've checked off a whole bunch of things about the boats around me, which I won't go into right now. Just in general, I like to be near all the sailboats, not beside power boats. So that's not a prejudice. It's just that sailboats swing one way in the wind and power boats swing another way in the wind and so forth. So a whole bunch of things. By the time I actually get to the point where I can now turn my engine off, I'll turn my phone off. By the time I get through with all of that and I turn it off and I say it's Miller time, it's probably 45 minutes. This is not a 5-minute procedure. It's probably 45 minutes, but you know what? I have never, ever dragged, and I have only had to pick up and move my where I've anchored in 20 years, probably 10 times, and it was simply because I thought I had it figured out, and when I got it all set, I suddenly realized I am about half a boat length too close to him, and I really wanted to be over here instead of up here. All right, pick it up and do it again. But take your time when you're anchoring, and you will sleep well at night. You won't have to be chasing your boat over us. Okay. So,
Joe,
yes.
when you did that first turn around the cleat and tested to see if it was in the ground, is there a ratio you go for? I think you said like 40 feet. Is that just the best practice?
I generally do my first test with my engine when I put out about half of the expected scope. One of the things I do, because I've got a an anchor locker up on the front of my boat, and I've got so much chain. When I find where I'm gonna, one of the things that slows it down a bit is when I find, okay, that's my spot, and it's gonna be at low tide, I'm gonna have 12 feet or 10 feet under me, but it's up in Maine, so high tide, it's gonna be 20 feet, 22 feet, 23 feet, and I've got to account for both. And all of a sudden, I may find myself in a situation where, gee, I need to put out 120 feet of line, or 100, in some cases, maybe even 150. And so what I will do is I go up front. I open up my locker. I pull out the anchor. I put it on the roller, which is a feat unto itself because of the weight of the anchor. And I start pulling out chain, and I start doing what you call flaking. And I run the chain down the port side, down to the stays, bring it back up, turn around, do it again, bring it back up. Now I got 4 lengths of about 15, 16 feet each. And then I go down the other side and I start doing it until I get out of 100% of the anchor road that I think I'm going to need to put out when we're done in 45 minutes. Then I can close the anchor locker and I can turn it over to my crew. I go back and I take the wheel and I go back to my crew and I say, okay, it's ready to go. And I know how much, gee, we're going to be putting out 110 feet. And I can give him instructions about when you get this much in, we're going to do a turn. And then at the end, when we're done, we're going to get all this much in and so forth. So it's a continuous series of instructions and recalculations. One of the nice things is, and we're going to learn about it here in a few minutes, is that if you can take a full turn on the boat that you're docking or a boat that you're trying to anchor, as we did, and even if it's blowing hard, or your boat comes alongside the dock and you are helping out at the dock, you're not a crew member, you're helping out of the dock, and this boat needs to come to a stop, and you're handed a dock line. If you do that, and the boat keeps on going in that direction, you're likely to lose it. If you can do that, it's better. If you can do that, a 360-degree turn, even any one of you in here can stop a 40-foot, 50-foot cabin cruiser that's going too fast with one hand. The cleat takes the jolts. All you have to do is get a full turn on it. All of a sudden, it's like magic. And a half turn, 2/3 turn, not nearly as good. Get a full turn on it, and then it's easy to adjust once the boat finally comes to a stop. A little hint. Okay, let me see. Lower the anchor, drift backwards. You may have to use a little power if there's no wind. And then when I'm all done, again, and the boat really has come to a stop and settled down, and the engine's been off for 5 minutes, and halfway through my first beer, I have to remember to sit down and say, okay, where am I located? Take some bearings again and make sure that I ended up where I wanted. And that way, if by some chance, 3 hours later, I think something happened, somebody moved here, I can take a quick look at my bearings again and go, oh, no, I'm still in the right place. I'm still where I should be. If you're going to be in an area where there's a chance you might be snagged on rocks or logs in a river and so forth, and you think it's maybe tough to get the anchor up because it's not just coming right out of the mud, then you may want to attach a trip line. And most larger anchors will have some sort of a hole here, sometimes here, and you can attach a trip line, which is basically a dock line attached to perhaps a fender, and you just let it float in the water. You want that to be about equal to the absolute high tide. If high tide is going to put 22 feet over the anchor at high tide, all right, get a 25-foot dock line, attach it through the hole to the fender, and it just marks your anchor. And now the anchor rope does its work. In the morning, if you go to pull it up and you realize, oh, it is stuck, it didn't get caught on something and I can't get it up. Now you have something else by which you can pull, and you're pulling from this end instead of from the other end of the shank, and it's likely you can pull it out from under whatever was stuck. The trip line allows extraction of the anchor crown rather than the shank first. So when it gets to the morning, I motor very slowly up toward the where the anchor is. I can't see over the bow of my boat as we do that, and so I have my crew on the front pointing me the anchor is over there, and I'll change direction, but the anchor's over here. And as they get up close, we've got hand signals. It gives me the fist to tell me to put the boat in neutral, and as we get right up over the anchor, I come again, try hopefully to a full stop. And if he or she is had their wheelies in the morning, hopefully they can just pull straight up, again using the anchor roller, but pull straight up on the line over the anchor roller, and hopefully it will come up. If I've done too good a job of setting it, then we'll take again that full turn on the cleat. Can even do it with the chain, and take a full turn and hang on to it in the hand, and I'll motor in the same direction, and I'll use the boat's engine to go that way and to help pull the anchor up and out. Do it slowly, and finally you'll realize, or I'll realize, oh, I motored and nothing's happened, and then all of a sudden I'm watching them off to my other parts of the harbor, and I realize, oh, the boat's doing this. Okay, the anchor's up. And I know maybe sometimes before the guy on the bow knows that the anchor is up. And again, then I shift into neutral, kind of drift, keep the boat moving under control, but not trying to go anywhere. bring up the anchor and stow it in the water. That's what I just described. I cleat the line, power over it, take it in. And again, never, ever, ever cleat it to the stern of your boat. You might decide, well, if we just take this anchor line and we bring it to the stern and put it around this, well, what's going to happen if you did something like that? You guys are going to have some pretty powerful engines. Your stern is going to come to a halt. Your bow's going to go up in the air. Your boat's going to try to move away, and it's going to get pulled down by the stern until potentially you've sunk your boat because you put the stern right under water. So never, ever, ever. All right. That was a Reader's Digest version of anchoring. Any other questions? Yes, Mike.
Under what conditions might you consider throwing a second anchor?
I never have. There are people who, I think that there are people who advocate putting an anchor out with going 2 anchors if it's going to be extremely windy. And if you're going to be approaching gale force, hurricane force winds, and you think the winds might be shifting, if you know how to do it properly, you've been educated in how to set 2 anchors at an angle, and at the proper angle and so forth, then yes, you can put 2 anchors out. If it's going to be that windy, then I would put the 2 anchors out, and I would find myself some nice bed and breakfast ashore and wait out the storm. I would not want to be on the boat and finding out if it worked. Because if it doesn't work, it has hit the fan, and you do not want to be on the boat. I have talked to a couple of people who have decided to stay on their boats during hurricanes because they were going to save the boat. Every one of them said the same thing. Never, never, never again will I ever do that. I will get off the boat. That's what boat insurance is for.
Just to further to that question, you're at a sandbar. Would you consider doing a bow and a stern? Yeah.
Yes. All right. And there's an exception now. It is possible. Let's suppose you are in a situation where the wind, you're off the beach, and the wind is blowing onto the beach, which might be very common. And so if the beach is here and you drop the anchor down out there in the garden out there, and you come back near the shore, but you don't want boy, it's crowded with boats, they're close together, you have no choice, where then a lot of them will then take a stern anchor and go out toward shore and bury it close to shore, even on the beach and so forth, as a way of just keeping the boat from doing any dancing and keeping it in place.
Right.
But the work is being done by that anchor. That's what's taking the abuse. Your boat's still facing into the wind. This is just to keep you from doing any swinging.
Right.
Because sometimes you're in a situation, boy, they're real close.
Yeah.
Any other questions on anchoring? Yes, Mike.
In the book, it mentioned that the chain part of the road should be the length of the boat.
You read a dozen articles, you get a dozen different opinions. In my case, because when I bought my last anchor on the road, I knew that in many cases the theory of a 7-to-1 ratio for normal conditions, 10-to-1 if it's going to be breezy, just isn't possible. Too many of you guys are out there. Too many of us are out there anchoring, and places are crowded. And most other boaters don't know enough to put enough anchor out. They have no idea. They've never heard any of this. They don't have a clue. And I'll still see people put out 3-to-1, 4-to-1. I mean, literally, the anchor goes over. They bring the boat to a stop. They don't do anything to set the anchor. They just tie it off and go find a view. Their anchoring procedure takes 2.5 minutes. Because there's so much of that goes on, there's no way that I can put out that much road. And so my answer to it was that when it came time for me, 14 years ago, to upgrade what came with my boat, I got the boat used, and the guy left it behind, I wanted better. I could have gotten away with a 28-pound anchor. I bought a 35-pound anchor. I could have gotten away with easily 10, 12, 15 feet of chain. I bought 30. I could have done the things said I could go with a, forget now, but let's suppose I was supposed to put a 3/8 chain on both my sides. I kicked it up another 1/16 of an inch. 1/16 doesn't sound like much until you go back to your high school geometry and figure out when you increase the diameter by a 1/16, what does that do for the surface area? It was a major jump, and you jump a 1/16 and so forth. So I got much heavier chain, much heavier anchor. The line that I used is also another 1/8 of an inch heavier than what was required and so forth. So I went for much heavier stuff. And it is a bruiser to try to pull my anchor and chain up because it's so heavy. But I also know that I don't, therefore, have to put, I mean, I'm on my way to an all-chain road. You know, I'm getting there, so to speak. And therefore, I don't need to put out 7-to-1 to be safe at night. I can get away with, in many circumstances, 5-to-1 because I've got so much chain along that it would have to be absolute ferocious to pull all that chain up off the bottom. It's just so heavy. Picture 30 feet of really heavy chain, what it would take for any of us, and how many of us it would take if we got up on step ladders to pull the chain up high enough to get it completely off the bottom of the floor all the way to the anchor. I mean, it takes a lot to take all of it. So I've made up for it. Most people, to answer your question, probably don't have the whole chain. If you can do a half a boat length, you're doing all right. You got a 20-foot boat, you got 10 feet of chain. The trouble is all of us have to find a place to stow it. And now, do you have a all chain and a windlass anyways?
I don't know what the road is made up because we haven't even gotten up there. But I know it has a windlass. Yeah. Because
Maybe
we've got windlass controls
And
at
if
the
you-
helm, and then we've got foot pedals up on the bow.
Likely, not positive, but likely you have all chain, in which case all those numbers just run out the door because all chain, you can often get away with 3-to-1. Just because it is all chain, just because of the weight of it. All you want to do is make sure that what you've got out there, and either by weight of a chain or by length of rope, because of the nylon rope, is that if it blows like heck, is that the pole on the bottom of the ocean is still horizontal, that it isn't pulling the anchor up out of the bottom. Either the weight of the chain can do that, or really long rope that is now so long that it's almost horizontal at the bottom of the ocean. Anything else? Okay. Because it's related to it, we're going to pause and we're going to switch stuff. And we're going to go to the back, and I think it's section 16 about ropes and knots, page 176. Now, I'm not actually going to use what we're doing here because it's a short, and I will, again, rather demonstrate a lot of this stuff. And I'm going to run through it quickly, and it isn't, for the purposes of the test, I've already told you the important stuff. And I'm going to repeat it right now so that the important part is going to be knowing your ropes and which ones get used for what purpose. So there are 3 main types of rope that we use today. The first thing I'm going to show you is what we no longer use, and that's some sort of a sisal or a coir or a hemp line and so forth, that up until World War II, that's all we had. Synthetics came out around World War II. DuPont brought out nylon during World War II. And caused major problems. They rotted. Don't get them wet and leave them wet forever. They rot out when the sun bakes them and so forth. And so they had a relatively short life. Nylon was a wonderful invention. It was followed thereafter by polyester. And now we also see occasionally in use polypropylene. They each have their own separate advantages and disadvantages. So for anchor lines and dock lines, what you want is nylon. And if it's an anchor line or a dock line, you'd like it to be what we call a laid line or a twisted line, which is what I've got in my hand, 3-strand twist. Because the nylon has stretch, and this has more stretch because of the way it's created. It is possible to get it in a braid. That's a braided line. And sometimes it's 100% braid from start to finish. In most cases, there's a cover on the outside and a core on the inside. And so it's sort of multi-layer. If it's nylon, it has some stretch, but not nearly as much as this. So this is always preferred for your dock lines and for your ankle lines, a braided nylon line. If you are tying up to a dock, or you're putting out, for me, it's a mooring. I leave my boat for the week and it's on a mooring, and that line goes out through a chock on the front of the boat. It goes from a cleat out through the tow rail, and the tow rail there is a finished piece of cast metal that's nice and smooth all around that keeps it in place so it isn't rubbing. But even that, as smooth as it is, I want something that will be the old sacrificial lamb, and that would be some chafing gear. And where it goes out through the chock, I want that in place so the line passes through the middle of it and is kept protected. And if it gets really stormy and really nasty and something wears out, I want it to be a $12 piece of chafing gear and not a $150 piece of mooring line. They can be this, they can literally be garden hose that fits, that you cut to size, and you thread a line through everything and sew it in place so it doesn't move. It can be some sort of a heavy duty fabric that you buy just created to be a chafing gear. Again, you have to stitch this in place so that as the boat is working, and this one clearly, I don't know where I got this, but clearly that chafing gear moved because this got worn out in the wrong place. This must have slid, and eventually that spot, and they went through the chock and eventually wore out. But you want that over the spot where it goes through the chock. Same on your dock lines where they go out, any place they cross over a place where it could get abrasion. Make sure you've got chafing gear. Wear those things out, not your lines. So, nylon line with a braid. I'm going to send around two types. I'm going to do a little editorializing. This came from West Marine. I'm going to pass it around, and I want to get it to come around. I'm passing this out. This came from Ocean State Job Lot. I want you to notice two things. When you get this, squeeze it. You know, squeeze the Charmin ad, squeeze it, see how firm it is. Try to twist it open and notice, okay, I can twist it open, but it's a little bit of work. Grab this stuff and notice how mushy it is and how easy it is to peel this thing open. When I bought those, it was $8 for 100 feet of this stuff. 8 cents a foot, and it was advertised as anchor line. Do not buy your lines at Ocean State Job Lot. This stuff at the same time was, and now this is a little heavy. This looks like a 3/8, and this is a 1/4 inch. But it's definitely bigger. This stuff probably ran 75 or 80 cents a foot. This was going for 8 cents a foot on sale. Also notice this wonderful thimble that's on here that they put on there for your anchor, so you can put your shackles on it and tie it. Guess what? See that shackle? It is. I want you to listen to this one. Guesses what that is? Plastic. When you're buying things to make sure that your boat is safe and the people on board are safe, pay the money for real marine stuff. If you're buying the wax for your boat and the cleaner for your boat, you want to buy it at the auto supply place, have it, go right ahead. But when you're buying parts for the engines, buying parts for the boat that make a difference, buy the good stuff. You own a boat, yeah, it's expensive, it's worth it. So I'm going to pass both of them around. Notice the difference in quality between the two. Just pass them around while I'm talking about the rest. So that's nylon laid line or nylon twist. This is the same. This is certainly, this is even heavier than what well, that's almost the size of what I have on my boat from my anchor line. Again, the nylon 3-strand twisted line. You will also encounter line that looks like this. That will be polyester. Polyester and nylon are probably equal in strength as far as abrasion resistance and pulling and what does it take to break it, the tensile strength. There are some differences, not enough to be worried about. For the most part, Polyester, you're gonna use any place where you don't want the line to stretch. So we sailors love it when we're setting our sails. We wanna put that line around a winch, crank it in tight, and now we want that sail to stay put. We don't want the wind to blow hard and the line to stretch, and now my sail's out of shape. So we use polyester for those reasons. On power boats, I don't know whether you normally have polyester lines on board or not on a power boat. The third thing that we'll encounter occasionally, anybody ever do tubing, water skiing, towing anybody behind boats? You have yellow lines, and do you know what it's made out of? What's the name of it?
Polypropylene.
Polypropylene. And you use it, what's its major benefit as a tow rope? It floats. So when you're towing people, it's a wonderful thing, because when you bring the boat to a stop, the line doesn't sink and go around your propeller while you're not looking. And then you go to take off again and you've got it wrapped. So it floats, which is a wonderful thing. There's a problem. It's a devil to tie a knot in. And if you feel it, it's very, very slippery. I'll send this around. And when it comes around, you try to tie a knot in it, you realize, man, that thing is just going to come apart in no time. So it's the devil to tie knots in, but it's used for that reason. The other thing is that it is susceptible to the sun. It won't rot, but don't leave it sitting on deck. It will eventually, the sun will kill it. Okay. So those.
We can also put that on like a light rig.
For the same reason.
Throwable light rig.
Yes. Yeah. But the same thing is that you have to watch out if the light ring is out on display at the time, and that is too. Yeah. Now I have a pack on the boat with a. We'll see if here in a bit where if that's attached to my light ring, but then the whole thing's in a cone, so it's all hidden from the sun. Okay. If and when you decide you're going to get a and make up a anchor road for yourself, if you're not paying someone to make the whole thing up and you're going to put it all together yourself, and that's fine. Make sure any place the rope touches things in it that you use a real honest to God thimble, not the plastic one, but you use, I'm not sure I have one, but use a metal thimble, and the shackles so that you've got metal to metal and not metal to wood. And when you do shackles, especially on an ankle line, what you want to make sure is that it's on the bottom of the ocean, that as it sits there and moving, that this thing isn't backing itself out and all of a sudden you're floating away. And the way you do that is that you, and I don't know where the term came from, you mouse it. And you use some stainless steel wire, and this has been around so long it's actually broken, but you can see what the concept was to make sure the pin, once you put it all together, you want it to stay together for a few summers, that you use the stainless steel wire, not regular steel wire, because steel wire and salt water will rot out in no time. But just to make sure that that pin stays put until you're ready to take it apart.
What type of line would you use for your tether?
What kind of line? It's a special nylon, it's a special polyester woven strap that's attached to special hooks.
Oh, it's strap.
It's a flat strap, so if I step on it, it doesn't roll into my foot. Okay, now, knots. I'm going to demonstrate only a couple, and I'm going to give you a kit that you can practice with. We have tried for years and finally gave it up, trying to teach knots here in this class. And what we figured out is that, okay, we try to teach a whole bunch of knots on one night. You get to the next week, okay, now show me those knots you learned last week. All right, well, we'll teach one knot per week. Same thing, we get to the next week. Can you redo the knot? Well, no, I forgot. Because, why? Knots are like, go back to when you were 3 years old and you were given the first shoes with laces. And when finally your mother says, you got to learn to tie this yourself, guess what? If you don't remember, I can tell you, it took a while. I literally, one of my earliest memories is being in tears because I couldn't tie my shoelaces at 3 years old. I was just so frustrated. That's one of my earliest childhood memories. You have to tie them and tie them and tie them and tie them and do it time and time again until finally the muscle memory sets in. So I'm going to show you a few basic knots. I don't expect you to know them, but then when I'm done, again, you lucky folks, if you're taking my class, I'm going to hand around what you said you owned, which was a little kit. And again, that you can take home, and it shows knots. and shows how to tie them. And I want you to, on page 176, and I want you to write a web address. And it is animatedknots.com. Animatedknots.com. If what I'm handing out isn't good for you and you're still frustrated, it's a wonderful site because you can find the different knots and you can make it stop and go back and go forward and go back and stop and see exactly how things are tied. So I've got two little pieces of line in here, two different colors. I've got a sheet in here that says 6 knots to know. And the big one here is another sheet that's in here is how to do cleats. And the other thing I'm going to pass out is little baby cleat, little line on a block of wood. You guys get to take it home and keep it. Now, when you're sitting in front of your TV for the next few weeks and the ads come on, instead of going out to get something out of the refrigerator, this should be sitting right beside you. Pick it up and practice it on. Practice it again, until you're like the 3-year-old who finally figures out how to tie things. With knots. Now, so again, for those of you who are sharing materials, please only take one. Leo, if you have all this stuff and you say, I got it all, I put these together at my own time and labor, and if you don't need it, that would be wonderful, but you're welcome to, okay? Everybody gets one. So if, would you just take these around in one bag for everybody? And I'll take this out because that's where the original started. All of these are the same, one bag and one block. Give one to each one, and some of the people are going to say just one to 2 people if they're sharing materials. So, secrets to knots. Secret to any good knot, as I said before the class started, and most of you missed it, is you want a knot to do 3 things. You need a knot that you're going to tie to do the job for which it is intended. If it's a cleat hitch on the cleat, you want it to hold the boat in place or hold the line in place. If it is any of the other knots, you want it to hold in place and do what you intend. Number 2, it has to be easy to tie. And then the third thing that many people forget about is it's got to be easy to untie. And it's got to be able to be untied under strain. Now, all of us have encountered this. How many people have hoodies? How many people take those strings on the ends of the hoodies and just puts a little knot in the end? And then if you ever try to get that knot undone for some reason, it's impossible. Same thing in your shoelace when you were a kid. If, God forbid, you got a knot in the shoelace and you tried to take it out and you found out that it had been pulled hard, you couldn't get it undone. There are literally hundreds of marine knots. Most people will tell you that they use 3 or 4 98% of the time. You have to think. You have to know how to tie a proper cleat knot. You should know how to tie a bowline to make a loop on the end of the line. You should know the half hitch, which is the simplest knot of all. I'm going to demonstrate these for you. And those are probably, if you only know those 3 and know those by heart, you're probably just fine. I've had men who work in marinas tell me that's all they use. But also, yes, there is a clove hitch for attaching things to certain places. And a lot of people teach the anchor bend for how, if you have an emergency, how you could tie a anchor line directly to an anchor, but I think that's rare. Jim, do you use anything other than those? No, he's shaking his head. All right.
Usually back to sex of cleat, bowline, and half.
Cleat, bowline, half hitch, and yes, if you're on a sailboat and so forth, you use a clove hitch a lot. So let me first grab, you know what, I'm going to grab my anchor line here. To do is you want to tie up your boat to a dock and you ran out of dock lines for some reason and you don't have one left that has the loop in the end, then you can do what most of us were brought up doing, and that is, well, you just take this and you put a loop in the end. The trouble is, this is like the knot in your shoelace. If that gets pulled, you'll never get it undone. And the second problem is if you say, well, look, I'll just take this around and I'll put a knot in the end like that, Okay, and now I've got my loop. Well, the problem is that this will slide and it doesn't retain its shape, and again, you're in trouble with a knot like that. So the nice thing about a bowline is that it will allow you to put a loop in the end that won't move, and no matter how much pressure it's under, it's easy to undo. Now, I don't expect you to be sitting there doing these knots while I'm doing it. Do them at home. Do it with animated knots. I just want you to listen and understand how you use these and why you use these. If I needed a loop in the end of the line for any reason, how many of you were Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and learned the rabbit comes up out of the hole, goes around behind the tree? This is what we're doing. There's a bowline. So you put the proper kind of loop in it. Rabbit comes up out of the hole, goes around behind the tree, goes back down into the hole. For those of you who are in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, you're saying, what is he talking about? It's a wonderful mnemonic to remember how to put this together. And you end up with a loop in the end that doesn't shrink down. I can tie it to whatever size I want. I take my dinghy, which is 120 pounds, no, it's probably 80 pounds, fiberglass dinghy up to Maine. And I have a towing ring on the bottom front of the boat. And my tow line is a special tow line. I tie to the towing ring with a bowline. And for 200 to 250 miles going north to Maine, it's behind the boat doing this all day. And I turn around, in the next couple of weeks I'm heading home, and it's towed, and it's doing this all day, every day, all the time, long distance. And I get back to my mooring, and I pull the dinghy up behind the boat, and I lean over the back, and I grab this, and I can break it open, breaking the knot because and it unties that fast. A knot has to be easy to tie, has to stay put, has to be easy to untie. That does all three beautifully. Bowlines are real useful when you need a loop that won't slip. A half hitch is the simplest line of all. And it is simply that, gee, I'd like to tie something up to this post or to this pier, and I'm going to come around and I'm simply going to put a single knot in it. It's what you put in the end of your shoelaces and your end of your hoodies. But one doesn't do it. But if I put two, one behind the other, identical to each other, that will hold and hold and hold, and your boat will never go anywhere if you do two half hitches. Okay? And again, it can pull and pull and pull, but it can be broken open easily. You'll discover, oh, I can break it open and untie it. Doing 3 half hitches, 4 half hitches, 5 half hitches do not make it better. They simply don't. And plus now the more of those that you pile on, the longer it takes to untie it, and you don't want that. So half hitches are the easiest. Now, the third knot that everybody will need to know, and this one you absolutely need to try, is that little cleat I gave you, and learn how to do a cleat hitch. So in this case, we're presuming the end that's nailed down on your little sample comes from your boat. This cleat, let's presume, is on the dock, and you want to tie up your boat or a boat to the dock, and you want it to stay put. And so, one full time around, over the horn, and this is where everybody stops and gets themselves bent out of shape, and it just takes practice. And you do, it takes 2 hands. You twist the other end under, and that is your completed cleat hitch. The 2 lines going underneath are like 2 hot dogs in a package, okay? You'll notice that they're side by side. I'm going to pass this around, and I'm going to pass one around where I do it backwards so you can see the wrong way and the right way. I have to stop and think how to do it the wrong way here. Okay.
Leave it there for a second.
Notice that the two lines when I pass this around. So the two lines in the middle are side by side. Here you're going to say, oh, I twisted it the wrong way. And no, those two lines are not side by side. So what, and they show this in the book. They show the blue lines in the book how to do it correctly. But realize it all comes from when you do the twist to put it underneath. If you twist it one way, it comes out right. If you twist it, again, if you walk around a marina, you're going to see just some baffling things tied up. And again, it's a case of people who don't know what they're doing, decide more. I don't know what I'm doing, so more is better. And they tie up just a miserable mess of lines that are impossible to get undone. One of the nice things about that cleat hitch, again, is the same thing as the other lines I told you about. With that cleat hitch, when it's tied properly, one of the huge advantages of it is that if you're in a situation, let's say me at the bow of my boat, and I've got an anchor line tied, and it is blowing hard, or I'm at a dock and it's blowing hard, and this line is under strain, and I need to let it off, is that I can safely undo the knot off the cleat. Because remember how I said with a cleat, if I take a full turn and I hold this end, I can control the boat with no problem whatsoever. And so getting this, let me undo this. This is the one I threw the knot into. Let me undo them. There will be cases where you have a boat or a line on your boat tied to a dock where it's under strain and you need to untie the dock line. Maybe you're walking down the dock and some knucklehead is trying to get away from the dock and he forgot to untie one line and you're right there beside him and you jump to the rescue. Well, the good news is that this end tied to his boat could be under a wicked strain and he's only just now waking up to the fact that why aren't we going anywhere? And you come along and you say, or it's something going on in your boat, I have to get that undone. Strain here can be tremendous. You can still undo this easily, and right up till you get to that point, you can control it with absolutely no problem whatsoever. You can undo a cleat hitch, even if it's under major strain, if the cleat hitch is done properly. Now, when you're ready to let it go, when it's safe to do so, now you can unwound. So that's the major advantage of a properly done cleat hitch, is that it's a very safe, it's very quick to tie and untie. But just like learning how to do the bunny ears on your shoes when you were 3, practice, practice, practice. So I gave you all kits. There's no excuse. But by the time you get your boats out of the water this year, that you can't do a rolling, you can't do a cleat hitch, and just a couple of half hitches to keep a knot from undoing itself.
And Joe, one more time on that animated website?
Animatedknots.com. Very good site. One other little demo, I think I've got the stuff I want here. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Now, I also get a question once in a while, and that is, James, did you do me a favor? You just go around and give everybody one of these and then bring the rest back to me. Give everybody a string. All right. I'm going to continue on here for a minute. When you get the string from James, you hang on to it, and I will tell you why I handed it out to you. Don't do anything with it, just hang on to it. And I'm going to move on to another section here. So we finished up. Okay, let's go back now to page 113, adverse conditions in emergencies. This is the, okay, you're out there and you listen to the weather forecast and something went wrong anyway. Maybe it's the weather, maybe something went wrong with your boat, maybe something happened to one of your crew. So what do? I put a couple of stars on page 113, right-hand column, where the bullet point is, and it starts, one message will be repeated. And it's the importance of wearing a life jacket. You're gonna hear me say that about 20 times today. When this happens, get everybody in life jackets. James just handed you a string with a knot in it. What I want you to do is put your 2 index fingers through with a knot right in the middle. All right? And pull until it breaks. Where did it break?
At the knot.
What's that?
Oh, there we go.
Give it a good strong tug. Come on, it's only a string. You can do this.
Oh, there we go.
Where did it break?
Right at the knot.
Right at the knot.
Yeah.
Remember that no matter what kind of knot you use, a knot will always weaken the line. No matter how good the knot is, every knot weakens the line. Lines are strongest when they're just doing this. And if they go around a cleat, the minute you put a bowline in it, anything else, realize that it can weaken a line. Okay? Don't think it strengthens the line. It doesn't. I've had some people ask that question. So pass these around so that everybody can see clearly. Every one of you, it broke at the knot. Anybody have it break any place other than the knot? Okay. Just a little heads up on that. Okay. Adverse conditions and emergencies. This boat right here, by the way, this was part of a longer scenario. This was right at the Golden Gate Bridge. Golden Gate Bridge is to the right. This is on the ocean side of things. And this knucklehead sailor somehow got himself in just a little too close to shore. And they didn't show all the scenes, but yeah, it was a capsize. But luckily, you can see a swimmer in the water surfing or something. And, nobody died, but pay attention. So, first action for any danger, put on your personal flotation device, your life jacket. All right, man overboard. One of the worst things that can happen to you, believe me, is man overboard. Jim described to everybody earlier that, yeah, he was on a sailboat and all of a sudden he found himself in the water and he didn't even know he was going in. And as he said, he was smart enough to be wearing his life jacket, and we were, I think, very happy that your life jacket worked and that it was on.
I always wanted to prove that that thing would work.
Now, they talk about tethers and jack lines. Sailors use these. There's the jack line running bow, stern, one on each side. Would be used not in conditions like this. Would be used if you are traveling great distances and are likely to encounter storms. We were just talking to one of our members last night who's got himself a nice new toy, very large one, and he and 6 of his best friends are going to sail in a race from Newport to Bermuda in June. And that takes about 4 or 5 days. Believe me, they will all have life jackets on. They will have tethers attached to their rings, which are on their life jackets. It will be attached to jack lines, and they will wear them all the time that they're on deck, just to make sure that they stay attached to the boat. I have all of that stuff. I've never had need to use it. I hope I'm never out there in conditions where I feel the need to use it, but I've got it if I have to. So this is not something that normally sailors do use or that you folks in the power boats will be using. If the weather gets nasty, stay in the cockpit. As captain, watch your crew and passengers. If people have to move around, make sure they're always, the rule is, if you're moving on a boat, always one hand for the boat. Don't be carrying 2 things in your hands trying to get up the side of the boat. That's a great way to end up going for a swim. Always keep one hand on the boat, one hand for whatever you're carrying. Recovery procedures. Now, again, if you felt that it was a really nasty day and, what did Joe tell me in this? It's going to be, I guess it's time to tell my crew that in case the worst happens, let's review. Make sure people understand that if by some chance somebody goes overboard, first thing you do is you shout at the top of your voice, man overboard, and then you were the one who spotted that person. You go, man overboard, and you point at the person in the water. Now, here's the hard part. You never take your eye off that person. You do not turn back to the captain and say, do you see him? Because when you go back to look, crap, where'd the person go? I can't see him anymore. What you're looking for may be a very difficult to see thing because it's likely to happen in rough water. keep your eye on the person. Everybody else, throw everything and anything you can that floats toward the person who landed in the water. It provides a good trail of gear, and hopefully something will end up going near that person in the water. If they don't have a life jacket on, that they can hang on to. If they do have a life jacket on, it gives them something else to hang on to, makes them that much more visible. You go back to get the person. Keep doing that. By the time this class is over, I'll finally have the pulse. Circle back, and just like you were going to anchor, you go downwind. This is the person in the water, and the wind's blowing from that direction. You start out down here, just like you're anchoring coming into a dock. You approach coming upwind toward the person until you're close enough, and probably that you're close, but not right on them and they're beside you. And you can hold your position, and you can get a line to them, quote, attach them to the boat. That doesn't mean you tie them to the boat. It just means lines attached to the boat. They now have a line. They're now attached to the boat. Now you can proceed to go on with your man overboard procedure and try to retrieve them. At that point, you turn off your engine and throw it in gear, even with the engine off. You do not want any chance that the propeller is going to be turning. Propellers are clearly, if you don't know it, your propellers are very sharp. Outboards and boards, anything. So you turn the engine off and you put the engine in gear so the prop won't turn. And then you proceed to try to get the person back on board. Now the fun has just begun. Life slings, which you see here, is what I carry on my boat, and there's one in a package there on page 115. And it is this U-shaped ring attached to nylon tethers, a couple of rings. And the idea is that I could, with my winches and my halyards, be able to potentially winch somebody up. I can tell you, even those of us on sailboats, that is a real problem. Pulley system would work much, much, much better. Most of us aren't equipped with those on our boats. So it's possible, but difficult. For those of you in power boats, it's a little different. Now, the life sling is nice, and we'll see why here in a second. Maybe we'll see it here. Oh, they cut out some of the so if you're trying to get somebody back onto your boat, if you have a ladder on board, put the ladder out. If you have a swim platform, the swim platform may help and it may not. One of the difficult things about the swim platform is that especially if the person fell over because the water was rough. Well, if your boat's tossing in the water, can you imagine being behind your boat and trying to grab the swim platform and try to get yourself up onto it, even if it's got a ladder, with this thing doing this in the water, and if it hits you in the head because you miscalculated? A problem. One of the things that might work if you don't have a ladder, so you're going to have to assist the person, try to get them on board as best you can. Make sure you don't end up with a second person in the water. They talk about if the person in the water is in grave danger and cannot help themselves. It's cold water, they've been in too long, and they're having trouble moving and so forth. You might have to put somebody in the water, but boy, you better be sure the person going in the water is well prepared, is a strong person, can handle the situation, or you may end up now with two people in need of major help. If you don't have a ladder and there is no swim platform and you just simply don't have the strength, okay, it is calm water, and somebody just slipped off the boat, lost their balance and went in. Now they got to get up over the side of the boat. And even if it's only this far down to the water, and even if it's a teenage son or daughter who's 130 pounds and you're trying to pull them up, well, if you're my age and you're trying to do that, you're trying to get, well, you may or may not be able to make that happen and get them up over the side of the boat. Here's an interesting system that I hadn't thought of. You could rig that up on your boat. Just a dock line. Attach one end to the cleat, attach another end maybe to the stanchion, life guardrail. Keep it far enough down in the water. Here, for the sake of the illustration, they've got where it bottoms out up at the water line of the boat. Realistically, for a person in the water to get their foot into that, That line's gonna have to drape fairly far into the water so they can actually get their foot on it and stand themselves up. But even if they can only get themselves now up another foot up the side of the boat, that's a major accomplishment. And you are really close now getting this person back on board. So a simple rig like that may be all you need. If you don't have a ladder, you don't have a swim platform to get the person back up. If all else fails and you simply are finding, yeah, I got this person in the water, it's cold, they're right there, I can't get them out, I'm afraid we're in trouble here, that's when you put in the Mayday call. Do not be afraid to put in a Mayday call if you're just saying, we're in trouble. That's what your radio's for. That's what you should do. I'm praying. And so what they did with them is that they put out in San Francisco Bay, they sent a bunch of these people out before the races started, the week before, and did this test. And I don't know the number of boats, but let's say there were 15 of them. These things are all 35 feet, would have been small. Most of them would have been 40 feet to 70 feet long. And they had them with chase boats behind them. And they had somebody on board every boat in a wetsuit and a life jacket. And the person in the wetsuit and everybody on the boat knew what was going to happen. And when the person on the boat decided the time was right, he simply jumped overboard into the San Francisco Bay. Now in a wetsuit to keep warm, had a life jacket. Now the job of the people on that boat was to come back and make contact, get a rope to this person, not get them back on board, just get a rope to this person. And they were timing all these boats. Now these guys are pros. They knew it was going to happen. They were prepared. The average amount of time it took these boats and these pros to get back and get a line to the person in the water was 22 minutes.
What?
Everybody was shocked. You will also have the major problem if somebody falls off your boat. You will be amazed at how quickly that person is out of sight. All you can see, because they had disappeared. Especially if they don't have a nice big bright life jacket on. If you want to test this, go out someday, a breezy day, not a howling wind, just a breezy day, and take a life jacket or one of those square seat cushions and toss it over. And give yourself about 10 seconds and then say, okay, now let's go back and catch it. Get out the boat hook and let's go pick it up and start timing yourself and see how long it takes you to get that back on board. You will be stunned. Keep people on board. Don't let them fall in. Be patient. We are right at 8 o'clock. Let's stop for 5 minutes. If anybody needs to get a drink, needs to use the bathrooms. And at 5 after, we'll come back and pick up at 5. All right. So let's pause for a minute. Let's talk about next week. Next week is test week. And I'm sure you're all probably curious to know, okay, so what happens? So when we get to 7:30 or so, about an hour in next week, we'll bring everything to a halt and we'll start the test. We'll hand out 2 tests, one with 50 questions, one with 10. We're going to have you leave. We'll have Don Johnstone, who is here on night 1, will be back here. And I have 3 other members coming in to help out from us, all volunteers to come in and help out for test night. We're going to take all of you out of here and go back into the main library, go upstairs, all kinds of desks and tables, and we're just going to scatter you around. You're going to leave all your textbooks, your phones, everything here. Sit down, take the test. One of us will be up there around the area just if you have any questions, just to answer them. When you finish the test, I've had people finish everything in 60 questions in as little as 15 minutes. Typically, it's 20 to 30. But I don't think anybody ever goes beyond 45 minutes. It's all multiple choice, and the questions aren't any worse than the questions for the homework. You'll come back down here, and we will have the answers to the test posted, probably where the chart is. I'll have the test up on the wall, and I'll have all the answers marked. While we're correcting your test, you can walk over and look at it and see how you did. Let's answer the question number 14, check it. Also, it gives us a chance then to chatter and so forth, and the folks who are still taking the test are upstairs where it's nice and quiet and they won't be bothered by us talking. And then when we're all done and they correct them and everybody passes, as I'm sure you will, then Don Johnstone will have the certificates ready, the old suitable for framing certificates, as well as the important one, which is the little card to carry in your wallet. I suggest you take it home and put some clear packing tape over it, because it's good for your life for as long as you're voting. And if you're ever in a place where you need to prove that you've taken a class like this for a license or what have you, that's the card you want to show. That's the card that's going to be similar to your license. You gave us information about your height, your hair color, your eye color, all that stuff. And that's all going to be on the card so that they know that the person with the card in the hand is really you. So that will all take place next week. Also next week, I hope that some of you by then will have figured out that this is a pretty cool organization, as Jim and I have, and that you'd like to take some more classes maybe. You'd like to learn more about boating carefully and do some social stuff both on the water as well as on land over the course of the winter. And you might decide you'd like to join us. If for no other reason than, as I said last week, and I put it in that paperwork I handed out to you, if for no other reason than, boy, the first year $100, I bet you will save a couple of hundred the very first year on various benefits of the organization. One of the biggest benefits I'm going to tell you about now, and it was mentioned at the bottom of the sheet. How many of you are in new boats to you, or boats that you're still getting used to, and you'd really like to have somebody come out on your boat and spend a couple of hours with you, helping you run your boat and learn how to do better the things that you're doing badly now? I tried to set this up for years, and finally I had one of our members who's very experienced come to me and say, I think I'd like to do that. Again, a volunteer's name is Chris Summers. He lives in Medfield. He's a power boater. He's on many different power boats. He's taken a lot of different courses. He's only been one of our members for a couple of years, but he's taken a lot of training in a lot of different places. And he is willing to do take part as our volunteer for any of you for our Jump Start program. If you become a member at no charge, Chris will make an appointment with you this summer, meet you at your boat, and go out with you for a couple of hours on your boat. You will hear from him ahead of time. He will have some questions for you about what kind of a boat and what kind of things you need help with and so forth. And he will do this for free. He will arrive at wherever you boat. He said if it's down in Narragansett Bay or it's up on the North Shore or anywhere in between, he's more than happy to do this. So I was delighted to be able to offer it. It is a free service if you are a member of Great Blue Belt. And so that is probably one of the best things I can tell you about membership can do for you. And Mike, for those of you who are sailors, if you said, I'd like the same thing, but I need a sailor, I hereby volunteer for anybody who has a sailboat that's new to them and would like some ideas about anything on a sailboat that's driving them crazy. And boy, would I like a few hours of somebody's time, I'll be happy to do the same. So if all of this and what was on the sheet I gave you last week and the things we've talked about, the social events, the ability to, yes, if you said, like I quickly latched on to teaching and so forth, we're always looking for help there and so forth. There are no requirements that you must show them, that you must attend. We clearly would like you to. But we have some people who do nothing but take courses, but their schedules don't allow them to do that sort of stuff and do the social stuff, and we understand. And we're going to throw in one more freebie. If you sign up next week, I will be teaching, when I get all done, a seminar or two of some sort, and I know that our squadron will be doing so next fall, a series of 6 that you can take as a package or take them one at a time. And we'll give you a single free seminar of your choice taught by us in the next 12 months after you sign up. So a free seminar, someone to come out with you on Jumpstart and all the other stuff that I outlined next week. Yes?
I read, I think it was on the overall America's Boating Club website, that Jumpstart was capped at like 26 feet, something like that. Is that an issue?
I think there's a lot of recommendations. The idea is they realize that it would be for mostly newer boaters with smaller boats. Occasionally, we do run into somebody who their first boat is a 40-footer. I think I'm not sure that I want to go out with somebody who their first boat is a 40-footer. We do expect, and what some of the questions are going to be, is just that sort of thing is, well, do you have experience in boats? Have you made the jump from a rowboat to a 40-footer, or did you make the jump from a 20-footer to a 27-footer? That sort of thing. So, yeah, we want to know. The other thing that it starts with, by the way, is we do a vessel safety check. And that is, again, a free service that the Coast Guard Auxiliary and the Powell Squadron offers, America's Boating Clubs offers to any boater, member or not. And that is to get a member to come on board your boat and do the same inspection that the Coast Guard would do, except there are absolutely no penalties, no reporting. We tell no one, except that if your boat is up to snuff and has everything on board, you get a handy dandy decal that says, in this year you passed a vessel safety check. And you have all the stuff you need. The nice part about it is that if they discover something is wrong, gee, you don't have enough life jackets, the life jackets aren't serviceable, your flares are out of date, whatever it is, they inform you of it, gives you a chance to go out and correct it. We don't report it to anybody. We don't tell the harbor master. We don't tell the Coast Guard. We don't tell anybody. And then you can always call the guy back up and say, okay, I got it corrected. I'd love you to come back and check it for me again and get my sticker. So we do have to do one of those before we go out with you, just to be sure you've got all the stuff on board that you're supposed to. But because you've taken this course, I have no doubt you will all have a well-equipped boat. If you would like to join up next week, we would encourage that. I'll be handling that stuff along with maybe one of the other fellows. And I would ask you, I handed out applications to most of you. Some of you didn't get them. I forgot to bring them tonight. I'll have more with me. You fill out an application. I'll take a credit card. I'll take a check. I'll take a paper bag filled with small bills if they'd like to do that. Lots of them. But whatever it takes, we can get you signed up and have you become a member. And I think you will agree that it's a great organization. We teach the best courses going, and a great bunch of people socially. Just a nice bunch. So we'll do all that next week. With a free seminar thrown in for the first year. All right. Okay. Fire prevention. Other than losing somebody overboard, the only thing worse probably is a fire breaking out on board. Your car catches on fire, your house catches on fire, you can run out the door and slam the door behind you and call for help. Not so easy on a boat. So first of all, proper fuel handling is important. Keep your villages clean, check your fuel system. Often, at least annually, the whole system, make sure all clamps are in place, make sure the hoses are in good shape, that they aren't getting stiff, they don't look sticky, dirty. If you don't remember the last time you replaced some of your fuel system, then it's time to replace. Keep an eye on your wiring, especially if you bought a used boat and somebody might have done their own wiring and not know what they were doing. The leading cause of fires on boats is bad wiring. Old wiring, corroded wiring, badly done wiring. Use only marine parts. We just talked about this. You may look at an engine, you may look at the part that goes in the engine and say, I know car engines, this is the same goddamn thing. And I can just go down here to ADAP and I can pick that up for half the price. Well, it's not a marinized part. It's not made to be out in the saltwater environment. And being out where the boat is doing this all day long. Parts need to take that kind of abuse, take the salt air, and survive. They talk about this one. If you by chance decide, okay, we're going to go do down the beach and we're going to have a cookout and I'm going to bring the hibachi and the charcoal and so forth, and then you're going to go store the charcoal back on your boat till the next time, do be very, very careful. I frankly wouldn't advise it. Damp charcoal can spontaneously combust. It's like a pile of mulch that you get delivered to your driveway, and then you realize on a cold morning that the damn thing is steaming. And if you dig into the pile of mulch, you almost burn your hand when it gets in too far. That's working on chemical, biological decomposition that produces heat, and charcoal can do the same thing and actually burst into flame on your boat when you're not on the boat. Be very careful of charcoal. In spite of all the good work you did and all the inspections, fire breaks out. First priority is for people. Once again, get everybody in a life jacket. Get the people upwind of the fire. That's number 2. Issue your distress call right away. Do not grab the fire extinguisher right away. Your first inclination is going to be, let's fight the fire. Don't. Now that seems counterintuitive. I'm going to put the fire out. One of the problems is if this fire is in the wrong place, in the engine compartment, electrical and so forth, if it advances very far, you may have all your electrical systems go down in about 30 seconds. And all of a sudden your radio that you're going to call on is no longer working. And you can no longer reach the Coast Guard. Get that distress call in a hurry. Or you make the distress call and you have somebody else who knows what to do and fight the fire. But get that call in immediately. Where you are, where your boat is, what kind of a boat it is, and that you've got a fire on board. How many people are on board? If it's possible, turn off the fuel. That's not going to be likely. Depends upon where the fire is. What the fire was caused. Was it caused by the stove or was it an engine fire? You may have to jump for your lives, but if you can locate the source of the fire and access the fire extinguishers, pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handles, sweep side to side. And you go back and review that stuff, make sure you know what those 4 letters mean. Okay? That will likely show up on the test. If you've got an engine room, how many people have an engine compartment for their inboard engine? You have a fire start in there and you realize something's going on, there's smoke coming out of the wrong places. One of the big dangers is that you decide to take a look and you open things up, and what was a small fire that was kind of choking because there wasn't much oxygen, you suddenly have opened up a compartment and given it lots of oxygen, and things flare up even worse. Opening an engine compartment when you've got a fire going, do it very carefully and be prepared to slam it shut again. Any questions on fires? Clearly, man overboard and fires are the 2 worst things that you can happen to. All right, swamping or capsizing. We talked about the boats under 20 feet long had those placards on them about maximum weight and so forth. I said to you that was designed so that if the boat's swamped, and here's a boat that's swamped, and if presumably presumably they've got the proper number of people on board, you can at least sit in the boat and it will not sink if you're under the limits. And obviously will make it much easier. A, people will stay warmer because they're not completely in the water, and B, much easier for everybody to be seen and rescued than if everybody was in the water and the boat was gone. If a boat capsizes or overturns, chiefly the big worry, of course, again, try to stay with the boat, get on top of the boat if that's possible. That may not be possible, but if you can. If you're out somewhere and you're doing a whitewater rafting, you kayaks or what have you, and you find yourself out of a boat and going down the river, make sure you're going feet first. If you come into a sudden stop because of rocks in the river, you want your feet to take the abuse and not your noggin. Cold water immersion is a major problem. If you were to go home tonight and you got yourself a big, deep basin of water, maybe you got out one of those tubs that you throw all the cans of soda into in the ice for your barbecue, and you put it on the counter and you put a lot of water into it and you fill it up with ice cubes and you put a thermometer in it and you waited until the water got down to 50 degrees. And then you take most of the ice cubes out, throw them in the sink, but you leave a few in. And you drop a quarter in the water. And you roll up your sleeve and you put your arm in so the water comes up to here. And you start watching your clock. Pick up the quarter and drop it underwater. Pick it up, drop it, pick it up, drop it, pick it up, drop it. The water's 50 degrees. You're in 70 degrees, but your arm is at 50 degrees. How long do you think until all of a sudden you realize I can't make my fingers work and pick up water? How long might that take for most of us? Any guesses? Go ahead, throw out a wild ass guess.
45 seconds.
45.
There's some formula, isn't it?
I'm sure there is.
Something times something times.
Whatever. But how long do you think it would take before you couldn't pick up a quarter?
5 minutes, yeah.
It's 3 to 5 minutes. Now, mind you, you are not immersed in 50-degree water. Just your arm is. And it will stop working in about 5 minutes. You can't pick. You might be able to get your hand to do this, but fine motor and pick up a quarter. Now, if you were yourself entirely immersed in water in the springtime, this time of year, you get eager to go out in your boat, and it's May, and it's a warm day, and oh boy, yeah, it may be 70 degrees on the water, but that water temperature out there off of Boston is still in the high 40s. And when you land in water, one of the major problems is cold water shock. And that is when you land in water suddenly that's that cold, you have a gasp reflex. Now, I don't know how you are supposed to avoid that, but they tell you, if possible, put your hand over your mouth. Well, most of us, if you end up in the water, and Jim can attest to this, and I fell off a dock once being stupid. I was in the water before I knew I had fallen. So most of us won't have that happen, but you have the gasp reflex after you've fallen in the water and you're underwater, you just took in a lungful of water. And that's how an awful lot of people die. If that doesn't get you, then the cold water will, and within 20 minutes you can't swim. And then in 30 minutes it's hypothermia, and even if they get you out after a half an hour, they may get you out and maybe you're talking to them, and then all of a sudden your whole body system collapses because you're so cold and things have gotten so bad in your body system that everything is now shutting down. Gasp reflex cause a heart attack. It says try to block it. Yeah, right. Again, a major reason for having a life jacket on, at least it gets you back up to the surface. But an automatic is much better than a manual, but manual is better than nothing. Hypothermia is the abnormal lowering of body temperature. Could be air or water. Water takes your body heat out of your body 25 times faster in the water than in air. That's why if you fall in the water and if the boat's overturned, if you can at least get on top of the overturned boat, you might think you're cold, but the water is much worse. Get out of the water as much as you can. Symptoms are what you think they would be. So what you want to try to do, if possible, is retain heat. So yes, if you've got your life jacket on and you land in the water, no, you don't want to be doing this. You want to be doing this and keep your legs together and let your jacket keep you above the water and keep as much heat in as you possibly can. If there are, they call it the HELP position. That's a wonderful acronym for heat escape lessening position. Isn't that a beauty? Talk about a convoluted mess, but that's what the HELP position is called. And that's what he's doing here. And these three people here are huddling together, keeping their arms around each other, trying to reduce the passage of water around their torsos and keep still with the life jackets and just hang on to each other. And don't move in the water and try to keep as much heat in your body as you can. Now, somebody's got an overboard in this water, you do manage to get them out, you've got them back on board, maybe they've collapsed, maybe they're just shivering like crazy, and if they've been in the water any length of time in water like that, call for help. Even if you don't think they need it this minute, call for help. They may need it in 5 minutes and it may be too late by the time help arrives. It's a good idea to take some courses and learn CPR, move the people to a warm place, warm them up slowly, not rapidly. One of the best things I ever heard that has been recommended by a couple of people is if you have life jackets on board, if you have sleeping bags on board, get the person who is wet, stripped down, naked, dry them off, get them in a sleeping bag. Somebody else get down to your skivvies, climb in the sleeping bag with them, and let your body heat warm up the other person. Warm them up. Get them in the sleeping bag and warm them up slowly using your body heat to warm them up. Get them dry, get them in there, and then allow your body heat to help them out. Any questions on that? There will be questions about hypothermia on the test, believe me. I put a great big star on page 119 on that blue box. Be familiar with the instructions on that hypothermia box. Carbon monoxide every year gets to be a bigger problem because more and more boats these days, people are bringing on board portable generators. Maybe in the marina next to you, in the slip next to you, maybe out in the harbor, somebody nearby is running one. And obviously it can be a problem just from your own engine. So, as I think most of us are familiar with carbon monoxide, we hear about heating systems that fail in people's houses, locks oxygen uptake in your bloodstream. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you don't know it's there. You have to be aware of the symptoms: nausea, weakness, watering eyes, ears ring. Many people report your cheeks turn bright red. And I've got a wicked headache, and the cheeks are bright red. That person's suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. Lightheadedness, headache, drowsiness, unconscious, it will kill you. It can be from a bad engine on your boat, a leak somewhere, somebody's been sitting near the stern, you've been having your boat sit and idle at anchor, and people are sitting on the swim platform while the exhaust is right below them, and they've been sitting there chatting and having a drink for the last half hour. And you say, well, they're out in the open air. Yeah, well, the exhaust is right below them and the engine's idling, and they've been sucking carbon monoxide for the last half hour. That's what I just talked about. They talk about the station wagon effect. I don't think, there we go. So here they've colored it, and the idea is for those of us old enough to remember old honest to God Ford and Chevy station wagons that the window rolled down and they had the third seat facing backwards. As one of the guys says, yeah, my parents used to take us to the Cape and they no air conditioning in those days, and my brother and sister and I would be sitting in that third seat in the back, facing the back of the car. They'd roll down the back, and he says the car rolls down the highway and the exhaust comes out and it gets sucked in the back window, and the parents would wonder why we three kids were silent all the way from Plymouth to Provincetown. We were all dead. So that same thing can happen on your boat, either whether because you're traveling slowly or again you've got the generator going and the wind's blowing just the right way, and you can be sucking it up. Be very careful about that stuff. Many years ago, there was a problem out in the lakes out west where people were having the kids teak surf. Some teenagers died. As you can see, not a brilliant idea. Could be just because your exhaust system has leaks in the wrong places. All the boats that you're tied up to, if you're rafted up for a weekend or an afternoon, and they're running engines, maybe because they've got air conditioning on the boat and they're running the engines. Where's their exhaust going? Keep an eye on your pets. You can now get marine smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. Now again, you can go buy a carbon monoxide detector for your house and spend $30. Go to get something that looks exactly the same purposely for a boat, and you're like $59. What's going on? I'm going to get it. No, it's a marinized, made for the marine environment. It ain't the same. There's a reason it costs more than I just ripping you off. It is designed to be on a boat and take a marine environment. Similar to the hypothermia, a little common sense, fresh air, CPR, call for help. And watch out that it doesn't come back again after you get the person revived. Fresh air, fresh air, fresh air. Now, medical emergencies. Everybody pull out their phones. Everybody open up the app. We're going to be talking about medical emergencies. So somebody has a problem on your boat, and Maybe it was carbon monoxide, maybe it was hypothermia, and you don't remember what I said, because it's 3 years down the road. You've got your app on board. Open up to the first page, top right, you've got emergencies, touch that red emergency button. And now you've got 3 choices, either call for help, making visual distress signals, or more importantly, the third one is medical emergencies. And again, you've got a whole bunch of icons here that bring up all kinds of possible medical problems and will give you recommended solutions to help the person who's ill. Great reason to keep using this app all the time and be familiar with it and remember that it's there. It's almost a complete synopsis of this whole course. Okay? What I've now learned to do, by the way, and again, it was a recommendation to somebody else that I'd never thought of it, was the problem of someone when I'm off on a trip and I realize I've got folks who are my age and I don't know what kind of medications they're taking or what their medical situation is. And I've now asked all of my crew who's going to be with me for multiple nights to bring an envelope on board and have all their medical history written down, all the emergency numbers, doctor's numbers, what the symptoms might be, what medications they're taking, all of that stuff. And they put it in a sealed envelope with their name and they hand it to me. And if we have a nice vacation and they're going home at the end of the week, I hand it back. They never open it up. I don't know, but you know what? If one of them suddenly went and collapsed in front of me and I go, I don't know what his problem is. And I realized, boy, has that been stupid? I never thought of it. So being prepared, that's a new one for me, but I do it now. I've been doing it the last 3 or 4 years.
And the first thing they ask is what medications is this person on when they're taking them away. So
Or when I call somebody from the Coast Guard, what do you think happened to him? Well, I could open up and say, well, it's been treated for this. So, never thought of it because it never happens to me, right? So if you're offered the chance, take a class. Keep a first aid manual on board and maintain a first aid kit. And the first aid kit is sort of like the flares. Well, what do you need on board? Well, it depends upon what you're doing. I don't do any fishing, so there's no fish hooks on my boat. So I have a rather small kit because I'm usually not too far from shore. I'm not moving very fast. And so it was put together by a nurse for me, for my boat, and had the stuff that she thought should be on there. If you are doing a lot of fishing and you're going farther offshore, you may need a larger kit. Mine fits into a small waterproof container that's only about that big. Sort of like a container you might reheat your lunch in to go to work. But I thought one of the worst things would be is if somebody actually sliced themselves, even working in the galley, and I had to stop bleeding and so forth. So I have an extra package of a lot of heavy duty gauze and so forth, just in case, but everything else fits in the little kit. Heat stress can cause injury. Yes, it can. Heat stroke and so forth. Watch out for people who suddenly stop sweating and get very silent and see if they're actually overheated. Again, common sense stuff about taking classes. Let's see if I have anything. First aid kits. They do give a recommendation there in table 11-5 for first aid kit. Not that that shows up on the test, but just if you don't know what else to put into a first aid kit, there's a good suggested list. Accidents and collisions. Any guess as to when most accidents occur? Anybody want to take a wild guess? According to the Coast Guard statistics, what day and what time of the day do most and under what weather conditions and so forth? Let's paint the scenario. Anybody pick? I heard a voice. Whose voice was that? Don?
Saturday?
A Saturday, you're right. And so what time of the day?
Yeah, let's say around 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay, you're on the right track. Yes. It is Saturdays in the afternoon in really good weather. Because that's when most people are out on their boats. Saturdays, good weather. In summer, everybody's out. So there's lots of boats out. And why do the accidents occur? For the same reason accidents occur in your car. People aren't paying attention. It is really, really easy to get as distracted on a boat as you do in a car. There was an incident a number of years ago of a fellow leaving South Dartmouth, Baden Harbor, on a powerboat, and he was absolutely stone cold sober. He had a captain's license. His wife was on board. He had no liquor on board. He hadn't been drinking. He was he was up on the flying bridge, beautiful Saturday afternoon, doing something, distracted by his GPS, and T-boned a sailboat, 35-foot sailboat. He was doing 20 knots. He simply didn't look up and see in front of him. Told the fellow on the boat. The fellow who was on the powerboat called for help and stayed on site and asked to be given a breathalyzer test and so forth. And I mean, the guy knew he was wrong. He knew he was horrified at what he had just done. And he admitted immediately, he said, my own fault. He says, I just wasn't paying attention. Eventually it went to court. It was quickly settled and there was a major payout. But again, experienced people who should know better, who simply get distracted. It isn't just the newbies who have this happen to them. Do not get distracted and put off by watching the radar, watching your chart plotter, and forget to look up and see what's in front of you. Keep your head on the swivel. Talked about this, doing anything to prevent a collision, keeping a lookout, even if that's only you on the boat. Anticipate the weather. Go home when the dark clouds are coming in from the west. And we talked about this, that if you do see someone who's in trouble, boat's on fire, somebody's fallen in the water, they ran aground, and you think you can offer assistance to them, because A, you believe that they are in danger. 2, you think you can offer appropriate assistance without endangering yourself or the boat, you do not have a choice. You must try to render aid to that person. You do not get to say, I see nothing, and keep on going. If you're one of the ones in a collision, first take a hit count. Got everybody? Once again, get everybody in a life jacket. Make sure there's no fire. Radio for some assistance if it's a hard collision, not just a little scuff. If it's such a hard collision that the two boats have actually pierced one another and are sort of attached, don't be in any rush to pull the two boats apart. It may be the two boats will float together. Pull them apart and one of them or both of them may sink. And again, stay with the boat. Have your charts nearby, and not a big chart like this. Always, always, always have your charts nearby. And that's what I keep forgetting to bring in is a chart book. Everybody know what I mean by a chart book, a spiral around book? Okay. Those are the best things to have because those will have a wide variety. They're 50, 60 bucks. They're good for 7, 8 years. They give you all the charts for the area that you cruise in, and they will have, some of the charts will cover a very large area, some of them will cover each of the harbors in detail and so forth, and they will really cover almost anything in your area and have it right beside you all the time, open to the waters that you're on right now, and make sure you are able to say and point to your chart and say, yep, I know that's where I am, and I'm going up here, and the water's clear in front of me. Make your chart the first thing you can rely on, and your chart plotter the second thing. Just confirm, yep, I'm right here. And my chart plotter says so too. Don't do it the other way around. Make sure your depth sounder is working and that the depths that it's giving you match up what you see on the charts. If you do run aground, and let's presume it's not me doing 4 knots into a little bit of mud, it's you guys who suddenly found some very hard water at 20 knots. Again, first thing, life jackets. Secure the engine, lift the outdrive, check for hull for damage. And if you're hung up, probably the best thing is don't try to move the boat right away. If the hull's intact and you did a soft landing, you might be able to shift weight around on the boat and lift the part of the boat that's stuck and back off. If you're down the Cape, that's a pretty good possibility. A lot of sand, a lot of mud, not much rocks. Up in Maine, North Shore, Lynn, Beverly, not so good. They talk about using another dinghy and an anchor to pull you free. I have never encountered anyone, it's called kedging. I've never encountered anyone who has successfully been able to pull that off. I'm sure somebody might. Jim, have you ever encountered that? This is the one that, I say, if you haven't run out of fuel, you haven't gone aground, and you haven't fallen off your boat, you haven't loaded on it. So it is one of the three. Running out of fuel. The 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule is a really good rule to pay attention to. Hopefully, if it's a new boat, hopefully if you've got a boat that you've owned for a few years, you will try to figure out, doing some simple math, that I've used my engine, I've used up a half a tank of gas in that amount of time. The engine has either run at cruising speed for so many hours, or I have traveled so many miles on a half a tank of gas, or something like that, so that you have some idea of what your normal mileage is from a gallon of fuel. Are you using at cruising speed a half a gallon an hour, a gallon an hour, 3 gallons an hour? So that if you've got 80 gallons in a big tank, okay, how far can I go in a round trip? And let's suppose you calculate it at 90 miles on a tank of gas. If I used every last drop, I could go 90 miles at cruising speed. Well, then on any given day, you should plan on, out of that 90 miles, well, I'm only going to do 30 miles out. I'm going to do 30 miles back. And when I get back home, hopefully I'll at least have enough gas that if I had to, I could have done another 30 miles. And what it allows for is, as you're on your way back, that weather suddenly turns stinky, or you run into a current that you forgot about, or the tide, and now it takes a lot longer to get back. And so when you arrive back at your mooring, all right, you arrive back an hour later, and you're down to a quarter tank or a fifth of a tank, but you got back and you still have some gas. So a third out, a third back, and another third in reserve is a real good way to run your boat. But for that, you need to know how many gallons you use per hour.
Joe,
Right? Yes.
if you're doing a long passage and you're planning on making fuel stops,
Yep.
how far do you plan between fuel stops relative to the range of your boat?
Well, that big honking 13-horse diesel I got
Yeah.
sucks it
I
down
guess-
to a god-awful rate of about 2/3 of a gallon an hour.
Yeah, your range is a little bit better than most.
And with a 20-gallon tank, I did screw it up one time, many years ago. My first overnight trip up, I thought, well, we'll get some sailing in, and I got a full tank in the distance. One 20-gallon tank of diesel, get the sails up a little bit, I'll be fine. Yeah, didn't have a breath of wind for 30 hours, not a breath. Ran the engine, got up to where we were finally pulling in, and there were 5 or 6 of us together. And I said, I get to go to the fuel dock first, because I was watching it sitting on E for quite a while. And my 20-gallon tank took 19.3 gallons. So then I went out promptly and bought a 5-gallon jerry can. It now travels with me up to me. So
How many gallons in your boat?
225.
There's another rule of thumb, and as I bring this boat that I'm bringing back from Florida, and the captain that's going to go with me gave me a great idea. He said, well, you can wait until you've drained 200 gallons out of those tanks and then fill up. But then you take into consideration, you have to hold that nozzle yourself, probably on your knees, and if you have a bad back, you'll be there for a very, very long time. So what he does is, as often as he needs water, right, which might be every 2 or 3 days or something like that, he always fills up with fuel so that you only have maybe 50 gallons to fill instead of 200. It's just a lot easier on your back. It's a lot easier on your knees. So that's a pretty good rule.
towing. My suggestion is, let professionals do it. Don't tow anybody. Don't ask anybody to tow you except in an emergency. If you really have a problem, you have to be towed, and let a pro do it. There are too many things that can go wrong. The things that are here in the book explain it pretty well. I'm not going to take a lot of time. The biggest problem is somebody else's tow line that isn't strong enough, a cleat that isn't secured properly, and all of a sudden cleats and pieces of cleats and tow lines breaking or turning into slingshots and firing pieces of metal at high speed and so forth. Most people don't know how to tow properly. Towboat US and Sea-Tow both know how to do it. Hopefully you've got some towing insurance, and you bought one of the $149 annual programs for them. I would not advise doing it. There is the right way and the wrong way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because the book tells you the same thing that's here, which I just talked about. Long lines, and slow and steady, and again, kind of common stuff, common sense stuff. Okay, the fog rolls in. Adverse conditions, we're on page 128. And you're in some condition like in the bottom left corner where it says fog and you can't see anything in front of you. If it sneaks up on you and you caught it in any way, again, that's a real important reason to know exactly where you are in your charts. And if you are out there, slow down, wear your life jackets, keep everybody on the lookout. You watch port side, you watch starboard side, put one of the best hearing way up on the bow saying, listen for anybody coming through the fog. Turn on your lights and use your sound signals we already learned about. Keep the speed down to, as they say, half of what it would take you to stop in the visible distance. If you can only see 100 yards, you make sure you can stop in 50 yards. The concept being somebody comes right at you out of the fog. Hopefully they're as smart as you. They're operating at a low speed. Suddenly you encounter each other. If you both hit reverse and bring your boats to a stop, you won't collide. Hopefully. But obviously, slow speed is better than fast through the fog. On the other hand, the weather really kicks up. Guess what we're going to tell you to do? We're going to tell you to, whoops, next slide, wear your life jackets. If it really gets nasty out there, once again, about 6th time today, put on your life jackets, close any open hatches, windows and so forth. Dress for the wet weather, the cold situation. Seek shelter if required. Well, yes, if the weather is really coming in lousy and you can find a way to get into a harbor and pick up a mooring or something, do it before the storm arrives and let it roll over you and then leave afterwards. Now, if in spite of that, you're caught out there and the weather kicks up or a squall comes through, and for a half an hour you've got 50-knot winds and howling rain and so forth, what should you do? For large boats, in some cases, actually heading out to deeper water, the waves, maybe a little lower waves, build up in height as they run into shallow water near the shore and get higher and steeper. And you may actually find going out in the middle of the bay, the waves are a little less. And that may be a problem. You're running for shelter and you can find as you get into shallower water where the water goes 20 feet down to 10 feet, suddenly the waves are getting really nasty. And you're better off turning around and riding it out than getting into the waves and having a capsize happen. And that's what they're talking about here, where wind and the currents are at cross purposes. That's where the waves really build up and really get steep and really get dangerous. If you're heading on the way home and you encounter just a front come through and it isn't a squall necessarily, but the wind that has been nice and light at 5 to 10 knots all day suddenly builds up to 20, and the waves that were nice low down below your ankles, suddenly they're up at this height and you're going up over a wave and you slam into the next one. You're up over a wave and you slam into the next one. That's a heck of a way to try to get home. And if that's the straight line home, stop making a straight line. Instead, cross at an angle, which is what this fellow is doing here. And he's going to do a zigzag course, 5 minutes off, a little off, 30 degrees off, turn, 5 minutes going the other way at 30 degrees, and going up over and over the waves at an angle is much, much easier on you and your boat and your passengers than slamming right into them. It might take a little longer. You will get home much happier people, and your back and your kidneys will appreciate it. Do not, under any circumstance, if the waves get exceptionally high, decide to turn around and get caught in a situation like this where you are sideways to the waves. And all of a sudden you get rolled and capsized. That's called a baroche. And again, that's the worst situation. So it can make you mighty nervous, and rightfully so. So be very careful in those situations and anticipate how you're going to handle them and if it's time to call for the Coast Guard to help you if it's really, really, really getting bad out there. They would rather have you call them and show up and turn out that, well, I guess I could have gotten in, but they'd rather be there and take control of the situation than be out looking for people who are lost and in the water. Now, if you find yourself in the opposite situation, you're trying to get back into your harbor and the wind's behind you and the waves are very large. First night we talked about the mythical situation with the life jackets about getting up into North River in Situate. And the waves are with you and you suddenly realize as you get into that shallower water that it's comfortable because you're running with the waves, but now all of a sudden you realize the waves are so high that if I go over this wave fast, I'm going to go nose down and bury my nose into the next wave, and the boat's going to pitch pull. Again, a disastrous situation where the stern flips over the bow. So instead, find a wave. If the waves are very high, find a wave that's heading into a shore and plant yourself right at this location and adjust the speed of the motor so that as the wave moves into a shore, you just stay in the same spot all the way in. You're not being overtaken by this guy behind you, but neither do you allow yourself to go up and over the top of this wave. So as fast as the wave goes, that's your speed limit. And you travel with it all the way in. It may be slow, but guess what? You'll get in there safely. And this, just don't do it. Now, this is what can happen when you're really experienced and you've got a great big boat and you do something stupid because of hubris, because of overconfidence, because I can handle anything. I've been a boater for 30 years. Jupiter Inlet in down in Florida is notorious. Take the North River in Situate and multiply it by 10. It's got a giant sandbar. It's a very popular place for charter fishing boats. Take 4 or 5 people out and go out for the tuna and the marlin and so forth, and there's a lot of boats out there. On this particular day, there was a guy on shore with a camera, and he was apparently a very good camera, professional photographer. It was a beautiful day, and he was taking pictures of various things, and he took 40 pictures in a row in a very short period of time. Many of the captains had not gone out that day. A couple did, and this captain had gone out and he was coming back in. He had an assistant on board. He had 2 people inside the cabin who were his paying guests. And he was just on, as you will see, a very large powerboat. And I tried to make that full screen and I can't figure out how to do it on this, but that's okay. And he snapped off a whole bunch of pictures in a row. So as you can see, we've got a very expensive, large fishing boat here coming in over the crest of a wave. And what happens next, and all of this happened very quickly, he comes up over the crest of the wave, and what I'm guessing happens is the nose went down and the propellers must have started to cavitate, come out of the water behind him and lose the forward push, and they stopped helping the boat, and he came over the wave and he took a dive. And now the boat has been caught in between the waves and is doing one of those roaches I just warned about. And now it's practically on its side. Now the captain is up on the flybridge. Now it's come back up to where it's supposed to be. The mate was in the cockpit. He was still hanging on. And now the boat's back up where it belongs. And these are the pictures that are over here. At about this point, come over here at the end of the night and take a look. The captain is now falling head first out of the boat. Now, this guy's been operating this boat for 30 years. He's a professional captain. He did something stupid. He did what he shouldn't have done. He drove his boat in and he got screwed by it. He ended up out of the boat. And luckily, the mate was able to do the right things. The boat is now on its own, essentially. And I think in this picture, if we could blow it up big enough, we would find out that the mate has gone into the cabin to make sure that the guests were okay. And then he went up top to take care of the boat and get it back under control. People on jet skis came out to get a hold of the captain.
and the news was not good there. So again, I bring these things up to say, if somebody who is that experienced and on a boat that is that big and that capable, and even they end up in trouble, then all of us can certainly end up there as well. And so learn this stuff that I'm showing you in the book, take it to heart, and remember it when you get out there and you're saying, now what happens? Know before you go. And I have been caught, I think of myself as pretty cautious, and yet there have been times I've been caught in 2 thunderstorms where I was so far from shore and my boat moved so slowly that there was nothing I could do about it. Believe me, I did not want to be out there, but at least I knew what to do at that time, and got everybody into life jackets, got the sails down, got the motor started, put everybody else down below decks, and told them to stay away from metal things in case we got hit by lightning. And so we came through it okay, but it was a scary time. So you'd have to be prepared to how to handle it. It will happen if you boat long enough. Okay, we're at 9 o'clock. If anybody has to leave, I understand. If you can stay for about 10 or 15 minutes, let's see if we can push through this. And what will happen is the last chapter 4 is very quick. It's about towing and jet skis and so forth. We may not be able to get through a review next week, but we should be able to cover what's in chapter 4 in about half an hour. It is all common sense stuff. There's very little I can add to what's in chapter 4 to enlighten and improve what's there. So let's get through communications, and we'll leave chapter 4 for next week, and then we'll go right into the test. So if anybody has to leave because it's 9, I understand. Okay, so we're back to our radios. VHF Marine Radio. Just want to see if I've got anything here. They have a note here on the first column on page 133 about cell phones and why you shouldn't depend upon a cell phone. First of all, cell phones in salt water don't work very well. The second thing is, if I quizzed any of you right now and said, how many of you, well, I can use my cell phone and call if I need help. Okay. How many of you have the Coast Guard number in your phone's memory bank right now? Anybody? Right, exactly. You're going to say, I'm in trouble, I need to call the Coast Guard. Plus, nobody can hear you, whereas I may be the person who actually is closest to you if you're in an emergency, and the Coast Guard may take 30 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour or 2 hours to get to you, but maybe I'm only a mile away, and I might actually be able to help. But I can hear you because I've got my VHF radio on. And I can come over and help you. And that happens more often than not, that another mariner can get there before the Coast Guard can get there. So it's an excellent reason why that need to happen. Few things you need to know about it. Yes, we talked about the weather forecast. We listened to that on my radio there one night. You get some assistance. It's good for communication with all the boaters and shore facilities. And if you have a built-in radio like that, you get up to 25 watts of power. These generally top out at 5 or 6, once in a while 7 watts. And so therefore, how far you can be heard depends upon how many watts and how high your antenna is. In my case, my antenna is up at the top of a 44-foot mast, and I can pick up the Coast Guard down in Long Island and down in Narragansett Bay when I'm up in Buzzards Bay. And I know that I can be heard at a great distance as well. It's all typically it all works on line of sight. If you've got a mountain in the way, nobody can hear you. This is in your book. You won't be tested on this. Then they're going to ask you to repeat all these numbers, but examine it and realize, okay, so therefore on my boat, how far is this likely to cover on a good day? You can figure that out. Or if you've got a built-in unit and you've got any sort of an antenna up in the sky that's 10, 20 feet up, you might find out that it will work pretty well for a great number of miles. So fixed mount and handhelds usually have the same features.
They will have on-off volume, squelch. What you do is you set the squelch until it makes a noise, or it's almost like a feedback sound, and you turn it just until that disappears. If you turn it up too high, then some communications will be lost. You just want it turned so that the background noise and chatter and squelch and hiss disappears. High-low just means that when you are in a, use some common sense, use some courtesy. High and low power, yes, my radio can be heard 20 miles away at times, but if I'm going into a harbor and I'm a half a mile from the marina where I want to dock, and I want to talk to the marina dock boy on his handheld radio, I turn mine to low power. Now mine has a range of about a mile, and I'm not bothering everybody for 20 miles while I carry on a conversation about which dock am I supposed to come into. Wait a minute, I got to get my fenders on the other side. Can you meet me on the dock? Am I dock beside? Nobody wants to hear that conversation. Remember, it goes for you too. Switch to low power when you're within sight of wherever you're going. If you're trying to reach somebody at a distance, okay, high power is fine. You've got the weather channel button on there. You've got an emergency button that will put you immediately to channel 16, and then you press it again, it'll take you to check number 9. These are calling channels. If you have a choice, stay the heck off of 16 altogether. Just never use it. That's what the Coast Guard monitors. If you feel you must use it to call somebody or call, yes, some marinas use to call us on channel 16. They will immediately tell you, yeah, this is Joe's Marina, switch to channel 10, switch to channel 72. They'll get you right off it, and then now they'll talk to you on one of the regular working channels that they describe in here. This takes you through the different channels, and this one's important. Most radios built in the last 10 years have this red button. Mine is a little older than that. It doesn't have one of those emergency buttons, but my built-in now has a distress button. For this, you need to get it is a wonderful invention. We'll talk about it here in a minute. It is designed to take the search out of the search and rescue for the Coast Guard. And we'll tell you a little bit about how it works and what you have to do if you have one of these on your boat. Anybody know now that they either have a handheld or a built-in with one of these little red doors that you lift and push? By the last night, I'm going to have Sydney. Did you buy the radio or did it come with the boat?
No, my dad bought it.
Okay, do you know the answer to this question? Has it been registered? Has the radio been registered to you folks and the boat that it's used on? Do you know the answer to that question?
I don't. I can imagine probably, yeah.
Ask your dad after we get done tonight to find out. Anybody else have that? And how about you? Is it on, do you have a handheld?
We don't know, but we're buying.
How again you buying it?
So we'll have to re-register.
If your boat hasn't,
It does.
and it has been registered to the prior owner,
Yeah.
the radio has to come out of the boat and go back to the people who built the radio, and they have to reprogram it.
Oh, wow.
You
Okay.
can't do it. So let's, now that we've uncovered this, turned this rock over, let's talk about it. The big problem for years has been, you know, the Coast Guard gets a Mayday call and they have to figure out where the boat is, and people don't know where it is, or they don't call back, and who is this person? Well, they finally figured out, let's build in a GPS system for this. Let's have this emergency system. And when you push that button and hold it for 5 seconds, a signal goes out, and every radio within range of that, mine, yours, everybody's, will immediately switch over to channel 16. If I was on channel 72, gone. I'm now on channel 16. I hear an alarm. It connects you immediately to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard will receive a signal, and if this radio has been registered properly with the Coast Guard, and you can do that through Boat US, through the Power Squadron and so forth, set up what's called an MMSI number. You have to go in and set that number up and program it into the radio. But it will tell, the Coast Guard will know that in my case, it is Joe Kelleher's boat. It's a 32-foot CNC 32. It's a white boat, sloop. And it has this kind of an engine and blah, 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 blah on it, and have my home phone number and contact information. They'll know everything about me. And the radio, having GPS built in, will tell them exactly where I am. And if they have to come find me, they know just where to find me. There's no more searching. Yes, sir.
So does the handheld VHF radio also need to be registered or just?
If they have that, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Do you buy it at West Marine?
Yeah.
And it has to go back to the factory?
I believe so. I believe it has to go back. I'm 99% sure that you cannot go in to an old radio and simply reprogram it yourself. They want to make sure, and that's one of the issues, and that was what Mike was talking about the other night.
Now, he was bringing it back to an electronic specialist, but generally, you're right.
That's sort of-
It has to be someone who has the ability to do it.
You gotta go get the right geek to do it,
Oh, okay, so an electronics
perhaps.
installer might be able to do it.
He will at least give you the right answer.
Okay.
I'm kind of guessing, but I know it isn't easy and not something we would do. Okay, so that's the whole idea of it, is they get an emergency signal, you can talk right to them, and they know who you are already, that it's registered to this boat. And if you don't answer, then they start making phone calls back to the emergency numbers you included. That's the whole point of it. Handhelds have the same stuff. I'm going to skip right by it. So that's why it's important. If you're in trouble and you need help, hitting channel 16 and getting a hold of the Coast Guard, they will respond to you. Even if you don't have that red button, they can provide you with help, and plus everybody else can hear you. And if the Coast Guard can't get to you, somebody else might be able to and provide the assistance that you need. It's strangely enough, it's not required. Again, I said to you 3 things when we started this: know how to fuel safely, wear a life jacket, and number 3, carry a VHF radio. If you were considering, do I need it or not, the answer is yes. If you turn your radio on, you must at least monitor channel 16. Now, you can set these to scan so that it goes through your choice of channels. One of them has to be 16, just so that if it's on and you're listening and I call for help, you'll hear me. Channel 9 is the typical calling channel, and we get a hold of me, your friend, or whomever, call them on channel 16 or it's channel 9, and then you switch over to a working channel. Working channels that we recreational boaters can use are these, and again, these are in your book. Yeah, you're going to get a question about that stuff right there. I don't know what the question is going to be like, but you're going to get a question about that stuff. So be familiar with page 136. You don't have to have every one of them memorized. Probably the only, we just covered this, let me see, the other channel that you need to know, almost at the bottom, bridge to bridge navigation safety is channel 13. There's actually a dual definition of bridge. If you are approaching a drawbridge, almost always they monitor channel 13, and if you need it to be open, you're going to contact the drawbridge on channel 13, or the swing bridge, or what have you. Of interest is that commercial vessels, freighters, fishing boats, and so forth, will be also, if they talk to each other, from the bridge of this boat to the bridge of the other boat, the other kind of bridge, they are also on channel 13. So both kind of bridges use channel 13, both are. We just talked about this. There are other benefits to this, and that you can sort of have an instant calling to other people who you boat with a lot and call them on their radio and sort of have a like ring. We're not going to get into that tonight. Emergencies only. We covered all of that. That's how it works. We're not Mayday calls. There are 3 types of calls that you may hear about. Mayday is strictly used for either my vessel is in danger of sinking or somebody's life is in danger. So you're going to be sinking, the boat's going to be on fire, somebody's going to be overboard, somebody's going to be having a heart attack. There is imminent danger that somebody's going to end up in the hospital or dead if we don't get help. And that's a Mayday call. Pan. I ran out of gas. I need help. Okay, nobody's going to die. You simply were silly and you didn't do the third one. You're going to run out of gas. That's a pan, okay? Or it may be that you're out there in the middle of the bay and you just came across a floating telephone pole.
and you just missed it, and you're thinking, man, the other boaters out here would like to know that there's this hazard floating around out here. Okay, you make a pan call, and you repeat it a few times to all boaters in this area or this bay. At this location, 1 mile off this beach, just south of the such and such a light, there is a telephone pole approximately 20 feet long. Use caution when transiting the area. That sort of stuff. That's a pan. And then the security. Security is simply an informational call. You don't expect anybody to answer you back. The most common one I hear is that down in New Bedford, there is the hurricane barrier that's up there, and they have gates. And as the fishing boats go in and out, it is real limited visibility, and all of them are making security calls. It's from the French, security. It's not security, it's security. And it's the fishing vessel so-and-so exiting New Bedford Harbor, hurricane barrier, or about to enter New Bedford Harbor, hurricane barrier. It's sort of like at the bend of the river out west where they can't see each other. In this case, they're doing a security call, just informational, let you know I'm here, this is what I'm doing. Same thing with a tug going through Woods Hole, tug going with a barge and so forth, or going through the canal. If they think they're going to encounter us recreational folks, they'll make a security call just to let people know, hey, I'm coming through with a tow. Towboat US does that too, entering a harbor, I'm going into a harbor, I've got somebody on a tow. It's just informational stuff. That's a security call, the least.
And they're all three on 16?
And they would typically be on, they would often do them on 16 and then repeat them on channel 13. Particularly, and that's what they say, and we're monitoring 16 and 14. As I said, somebody's life is in danger. Yeah, they're gonna want lots of information. Pan, as I say, out of fuel, lost in the fog, your rudder fell off, prop fell off the boat, whatever. And navigation hazards. Oh, I'm sorry. I said a pan was a navigation hazard. I'm wrong. A telephone pole is a security call. If you hear somebody on channel 16 with any kind of a hazard call, stay off it unless there's complete silence and nobody responds and you realize maybe I actually am the only one who heard this. Now, maybe you're 20 miles south of Martha's Vineyard and that's the reason you heard it and nobody else did. And this guy's making call after call after call and nobody's answering. And you realize maybe he's way out here with me too. All right, he's made 3 calls, I've heard no answer, I guess I'll respond. You want to go out and you want to do a radio check. The very simplest thing is to turn on your radio and you want to make sure it's working and people can hear you and you can hear them. You can hear them, you turn it on to channel 16, wait for a while and you'll be able to tell whether or not you can hear things. You'd like to know if anybody else can hear you. So the simplest thing is simply to get onto channel 9, not 16, and realize that many people are scanning channels, and you would say to them, radio check on channel 9, any boat in the vicinity of wherever you are, New Bedford Harbor. That way, if somebody is scanning the channels and hears this and goes to turn around and answer you, by the time he gets to the radio, it may have skipped right on by and he doesn't know what channel you are on. So tell him what channel it is so that somebody can return the call to you on channel 9 and say, yep, I'm in Falmouth Harbor and I can hear you loud. We talked about the weather channels. Okay, all of that stuff was in the book is pretty well, there's not much I can add to it. Yes, also not for the test so much, but for your own use, know the table that's on page 139 and use the proper nomenclature. The reason for it is this, the reason we say over, the reason we say affirmative or negative is that most of us grab this thing and we want to talk to somebody and we press the transmit button on the side and immediately we start talking. And the trouble is that, it takes a moment from the time you press this for the little electrons to run through the system and get to the transmit and send it out. And the trouble is that somebody asks you a question and they said, how long is your boat? And I say 32 feet. And what do they hear? They hear feet. 32 disappear. And the same with the yes and no, and it disappears. And that's why they have these
answers the way they do, and if your answer to them is yes, affirmative, well, they may not hear the but they heard the affirmative, and they know it is an negative, which would be a negative. And that's why some of these things have these, because they transmit better and they are heard better over the airwaves. So there's a reason why we have this funny language that's on page 139. And learn from other people what you sound like. If you're too close, it gets garbled. If you're too far away, they can't hear you. Often they say about 6 inches and held at a bit of an angle. If you're out there in the wind, all somebody can hear, like on the phone, is the wind. Learn how to use it properly. Ask somebody, how did I sound? Practice with it with somebody else, maybe on docks or boat to boat, holding it different ways. How did I sound? Talk back and forth to each other on one of the working channels or something like that. That's page 139, is just for your own use on the boat. Don't allow kids to use the radio, although they should be taught how to use it properly, but don't let them play with it. Just like knowing how to dial 911, they should know how to use the radio in case of an emergency. I'm looking for things that I start and say, oh boy, you better know this stuff. On the communications, I don't have much. It's pretty straightforward. And again, there's on our emergency app, there's a description of how to make an emergency call. If you forget how to make an emergency call, it's on the app we just talked about. Okay. I'm still running behind, and it's now 9:20, so my apologies for running long tonight. But I think we're done. We'll come back and we're going to race through with our track shoes on, the stuff about trailers and jet skis and so forth, because there isn't much extra in that I can tell you. And we'll race through 2 sections of reviews on the questions. And I think by the time we hit 7:30, quarter of 8, we'll be ready to go. All right? Yes.
Could you possibly send us the answers to chapter 3 and chapter 4?
Oh, she wants to cheat. I think I
No,
can.
I already did it, but so that I can know, because we don't have.
answers.
Yeah, because we don't have the answers in this, do we? Yeah, no.
Oh, all right. I will copy it, attach it to an email, and send it out to everyone.
Okay, we pretty much reviewed those 4 chapters in the test. It should be, did you roll?
I tell people that you don't have to have it memorized. They're not trying to fail you, but you must be very familiar. You must have read the stuff. One thing to keep in mind, I race by some stuff, not because it isn't important, not because it isn't going to be in the test, just because I slow down at stuff that I do think is important. That does make you a better voter. So although I blew by it, it doesn't mean you won't see it on the test. So yeah, you have to read the very familiar,
Right.
but not memorize.
Right.
And I have given you some things to put stars beside where I just know you're going to get questions. All right?
Thank you.
Yes.
The extra 10 questions, is that?
That's that. And one week I passed out stuff on the pages. Were you here the week I passed out a single sheet that had asked questions? Let me see if I have an extra. I don't know if I carried that stuff still with me. I don't think I did. If you will drop me, well, okay, and if for some reason she doesn't do what you want, just drop me an email and I'll send you that sheet too,
Okay, thank you.
okay?